Hello and welcome to Six Part. Today I'm gonna continue the series What If Deku Had the Quirk Nen Manipulation Part 2. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
Following the escape hours later, the smell of gunpowder and charred metal still filled the warehouse. The damaged shipping yard was covered in harsh white halos from floodlights from hero patrols. Overhead, a few police drones buzzed, looking for any remaining individuals. The actual battle, however, was over. Three figures stood huddled around a digital display table in a mobile command tent near the docks, each with a furrowed brow and more questions than answers. Eraserhead stood with his arms folded and his scarf, which was still slightly charred at the ends, dangling loosely from his shoulders. Muted, "I lost him," he said. Dusting off her black hero uniform, Midnight questioned, "The alien-looking man? You actually had him?" For a second, he doubled back, drew me away, not to attack, just to stall me. Aizawa's eyes narrowed. He was fast, smart, and exhausted. Whoever he is, he didn't want to hurt me, just needed time. Looking at the top-down heat map of the raid site, Principal Nezu used two clawed fingers to adjust the zoom on the display. Thought caused his whiskers to twitch. So, he thought, we have an undocumented mutant quirk user who evaded three heroes, an older gentleman with military weapons who somehow escaped through the sewers, and a third unknown teen with an anomalous quirk. Or perhaps not a quirk at all. Who coordinated the extraction of over 24 trafficking victims. Leaning against the table, Midnight's gaze was focused on the video as it was being played back for the 10th time. The book that floats. The accurate blow. The rescue mission. The fictitious surrender. The solar flare. Silently, she remarked, these weren't random people stumbling into trouble. They had tactics. Gear. Coordination. I hate to say it, but it was impressive. Aizawa paused before answering. He then whispered, and terrifying. Nezu took a sip from a thermos that had been in his hand since they got there. It seems our mystery book kid isn't driven by ego or recklessness. He was methodical. Hesitant in the right places. Confident when it counted. Which makes him dangerous, also said Aizawa. He knew exactly how far to push. Enough to escape. Enough to inspire. Enough to not get caught. Midnight let out a breath. And the others? The girl with the tail, the scale patterns? She wasn't in any registry either. Same with the rest of the victims. Aizawa remarked, they moved like vigilantes, not random people. Not sidekicks. People who've been hunted before. Nezu gave a slow nod. Then the question becomes, do we bring them in as threats? Startled, Midnight turned to face him. Nezu went on, I didn't say they were, but someone will. The commission won't like that we lost track of them. Once again, Aizawa's gaze shifted to the screen. Izuku's grainy silhouette, hands up, attempting to buy time for the others. They're trying to do the right thing but, he stated. Midnight muttered, but they're still vigilantes. Behind his back, Nezu folded his paws. Vigilantes, he replied, who are rewriting the rules. High above the city, crouched on a cell tower drenched in moonlight, Hawks adjusted his visor and scanned the digital readout again. It had been a chaotic raid. There were contradictory reports. The victim's ID was jumbled. Even he needed a back door to get past the commission's clearance walls, which had locked the file. He was more interested in who wasn't in the system than in the raid. For the 4th time, he rewound the video. The book that floats. The child wearing a hoodie. The well-planned mayhem. He was familiar with such coordination. It wasn't arbitrary. Hawks gave his earpiece a tapping. No names. No known affiliations. But someone trained that kid. The line crackled with silence. His mutter was, if he's a vigilante, he's not your average glory hound. He's tactical. Rescuer mindset. Could be a threat, or an opportunity. He leaned back against the steel. He added, more to himself than to anyone else, while a gentle breeze fluttered his feathers. Better hope the wrong people don't get to him first. After 2 days Izuku stirred slowly, his limbs stiff, dragging him between sleep and wakefulness like a weight on his bones. He was first struck by the smell of cold instant noodles and moldy floorboards. Then the old TV's static light flickered, creating shaky shadows on the ceiling. His eyes snapped open. Every part of him hurt. He croaked, ow, as he shifted on the slender futon. He flinched as a searing pain shot through his body. Putting up a barrier to ensure that no noise came from the apartment, using too much of his nen. He has been working intermittent shifts to maintain the silent zone, Quirk. Naomi called languidly from the other side of the room. You're lucky that Hiro didn't arrest you for being in that club. With one leg hanging over the armrest and her tail twitching behind her, she sat in an ancient lounge chair that appeared to have withstood a few wars. You were talking in your sleep, by the way. Something about bacon? And binding modifiers. Izuku dragged a hand down his face and moaned. Please tell me you're joking. Nope. You said, recovery ramen, too. Dramatic, kind of in a nerdy and weird way. He tried to sit up again, flushed. He was reminded that he had been hit more severely than he had initially believed by a strong tug in his back. He met John when he left the club and they went to his stash house in a different city. Attempting to remain silent until they were certain he was clear. When did you get here? How long you been here? Just got here less than an hour again. I was questioned about the night. I didn't say anything about you or more brother obviously. I don't know where Lambeth is but like John told me he should know where to meet up. That triggered the fear all over again. Where's Lambeth and the captives? Izuku blurted, forcing himself to stand up even though he was still feeling dazed. Did everyone get out? Naomi's face grew a little softer. All of them. Kids, women, even the quiet ones in the corner. Your plan worked. They're safe. Heart thumping, Izuku slumped back into the futon. The relief was more intense than the fatigue. He hadn't failed them, not now. Thanks, he muttered. Don't thank me, answered Naomi. You're the one who kicked the whole thing off. Her eyes were far away from the window. I meant what I said, Midoriya. That was brave. Stupid, but brave. Izuku's gaze was fixed on the ceiling. Story of my life. A few hours later the knock was louder than it had to be. 3 jagged raps that sounded like a warning throughout the safe house. John stiffened instantly, taking a soft, deliberate step toward the door. He took one sniff. It's a friend and extra body. Rain-soaked and with storm-eyed eyes, John and Shinso both stepped through the creaking door. The fact that Lambeth was all right thrilled Izuku. After asking hundreds of questions, he turned to face Shinso. He hardly gave the others a nod. Izuku was standing up at the dinner table when he looked at him. Without saying anything, Shinso walked across the room and gave him a hard shove to the chest. Izuku was startled back into the moment, nearly to his chair, even though it wasn't a full hit. You idiot, yelled Shinso. You reckless, selfish, self-sacrificing idiot. Izuku blinked. Shinso, you disappear. No calls. No texts. 2 days of nothing. Then I wake up to a news report about a vigilante raid on a trafficking ring, and the lead guy just happens to use a floating book and have green eyes? And you think we wouldn't figure it out? Izuku started to speak, but Shinso interrupted him once more. Lambeth came over here just as I was getting back to his shop, Shinso yelled. May has been going crazy. She believed you were no longer alive. Perhaps you were, I thought. And you didn't anticipate our desire to assist? Or at least be aware of your location. Izuku said in a low voice, I didn't want to drag you into it. Staring at him, Shinso said, bullshit. Izuku winced. You didn't trust us, Shinso went on, and you didn't trust me. May was not trusted by you. You didn't even consider the impact this would have on your mother or Eren, who has been visiting every hospital in the city. Or Toga. The sound of his mother's voice dried up Izuku's throat. May and Toga have both been inquiring as to why you ceased calling. Do you really believe they wouldn't mind if you didn't return? Do you think it would be okay if we heard about your body in an alley? Midoriya, you're not a lone soldier. Quit behaving like one. Izuku mumbled, I was trying to protect everyone. No, you were attempting to endure pain by yourself. A moment of silence fell as Lambeth stood in the kitchen, feigning to stir a pot, while Naomi watched from the doorway, her arms folded. Izuku finally said, I'm sorry. With a slight release of tension from his shoulders, Shinso exhaled and said, next time. Call me. Or I'll strike you more forcefully. After Shinso's outburst, the apartment was silent, and the weight of everything hung in the air like the humidity before a summer storm. Lambeth went to John to have a private conversation about something at the edge of the room after throwing his phone to Izuku. Shinso is going to wash his face in the restroom. Izuku had not seen his phone since he left it at Lambeth's place, and the screen glowed against his face in the dim light as he sat on the edge of the futon with his elbows on his knees and his phone in hand. Immediately above his mother, May's name appeared at the top of his messages. 4 missed video calls over the last 2 days, 14 unread texts, and a few voice memos. His fingers were shaking as he tapped the thread. Hey Izu. Where are you? Really? The EMP jammer is now complete. Like you when you drop something, it's noisy but effective. This is no longer funny, Izuku, please respond. Shinso is concerned. According to Toga, neither has your mother. Dummy, call me. The voicemail appeared, a 43-second recording with the label, still here. It was sent shortly after the raid was scheduled to conclude. He barely paused before hitting the play button. Hi, Izu. I'm not shouting, however, she spoke in a softer tone than usual, which confused him. I know it's you, but I have no idea what kind of crazy stunt you're pulling. With anxiety, no one else calls forth floating books and prowls shipyards like an urban ninja. Izuku gave a little chuckle. I had the answer before the news even came on. I saw your stealth mode, face, of course. And when your phone went dark, I ran your GPS data. It would be beneficial for you to clear your cache more frequently. There was a brief pause in the voice. Look, I'm still here even if you're scared, hiding, or hurt. And what if you didn't call me after doing something big, risky, or that turned the world upside down? I'll drag you home by your dumb green hoodie, I swear on every item in my shop. Another pause, longer this time, and then, but if you did it because you thought you were protecting me, I get it. Izuku gave a hard blink. I simply want you to know that you're not by yourself. You weren't. What will happen next? I've got you covered whether you need a shield, a getaway, or a freaking mech suit. All right. That's all. When your mind returns to normal, give me a call. Click. The recording was over. His thumb remained motionless over the reply box. Will you respond to her? With a water bottle in hand and her eyes sweeping him with casual interest, but not without empathy, Naomi's voice cut through the quiet. Izuku's voice sounded stuck between his throat and chest, so he didn't respond right away. Finally, he said, she's the type of person who builds gadgets when she's stressed. Tracker drones. Holograms. Just because I mentioned that I felt unsafe walking home, she once created a wrist cannon that shot paintballs laced with pepper spray. Wow. Naomi blinked. Then he whispered, she would have helped, she always helps, even if I don't inquire. And I still haven't given her a call. So why didn't you? Asked Naomi, who moved across the room and took a seat on the other couch. Because she would have come, Izuku said, clenching his jaw. Her back was strapped with an absurd object. She had a spark in her eye and a wrench in one hand. She would have followed me right into that warehouse. And you didn't want to risk her. I was unable to. If she suffered harm as a result of my entangling her in it. And what if something happened to you, and she discovered that she wasn't even trusted enough to try? Naomi asked, silently staring at him. He fell silent at that. With a softer tone now, she continued, Midoriya, you're not the only one who gets to take chances. The people who care about you deserve the truth. Despite the pain. Particularly at that time. You should allow them to ride for you if they are willing. Izuku glanced down at his phone once more. Mei's final text message was a single word. Please. Once more, his thumb hovered. Shinso threw his phone to Izuku, who caught it with a perplexed expression, and said, your phone is not going to work. Why? As he spoke, Shinso sat down on the couch with his feet up, appearing to be ready for a nap. It's already deactivated. Lambeth made sure that was the case. Remember, if the authorities are truly searching for you, you can't use your phone. We can discuss this with anyone until Eren gives us the all clear, said Lambeth. Izuku started to say, how do you know, but Shinso interrupted him once more. Eren was with me when I stopped by his store. He knows the whole situation and he said he'll handle it. Izuku gulped visibly. He was more terrified of what Eren would do to him for acting so carelessly than he was of what the authorities would do to him. You don't protect the people you love by keeping them in the dark. You protect them by letting them stand with you in the light. Brene Brown in other places except for the TV screen's red and blue glow, the room was dark. Toga wrapped a heavy blanket around her shoulders and curled her legs beneath her. For the third time, the same news clip aired. Low-resolution figures running through a warehouse engulfed in smoke and chaos, with grainy footage of the raid. She stared at the green-eyed blur on the screen. He was referred to as the Book Kid, however, she was aware. The eyes were familiar to her. That stance. When the door opened and the prisoners spilled out, there was that moment of hesitation. Her Zuzu was that. Despite her strong desire to go out and speak with him, she was still unable to leave the facility. Due to limited phone privileges in the facilities, she was only able to leave a few messages. She even contacted Inko about it. Nothing has changed. In her hand, a red Sharpie clicked. The figure on the screen was circled by her, once, twice, 3 times. Then, trying not to cry, she paused and pressed her forehead to her knees. She detested crying. She whispered, Zuzu. It had been days since she had heard from him. No call. No visit. She knew he was doing something significant, so she wasn't a fool. Something hazardous. However, the pain persisted. Following all that they had experienced. Following each discussion about what it meant to rebel and fight back without being viewed as a monster or a victim. He was out there now. By themselves. She opened her bedside drawer and pulled out a small, battered notebook, full of scribbles, notes, clippings, and photographs. She wrote on the following spotless page. If you die before I can yell at you, I'll kill you myself. Next to it, she sketched a small heart. Next, a skull. Next, another circle. She then viewed the video once more. The heart doesn't care if you're a hero or a villain, it just cares if you come home. Unknown, the forums came alive somewhere in the virtual underworld, beyond proxy-cloaked access chains and firewalled message boards. Title of thread. Book Kid, author, you_ain't ready. Did anyone else notice the Book Kid floating in the raid video? Even the heroes were unaware of his identity? Any ideas? Responses came pouring in. Red Riot returns. Looked like some Quirk hack at first, but the moves were clean. Like, trained. Purge protocol. Nah, that wasn't a Quirk. That was something else. Energy patterns don't match standard Quirk flares. Check the M burst around 1743. Giga Wraith. Yo, what if he's not a hero? What if he's like us? Zero eyes. I got fam locked in a place like that. Book Kid got them out. Respect. A comment was pinned to the top by a moderator. Note from the mod: we do not support criminal activity. However, we recognize you if you're reading this and witnessing the same world burn. If you're a Book Kid, keep flipping through the pages. A few of us continued to read. Later that evening, just after midnight, the safe house door creaked open in silence. Izuku, still wearing jeans and a hoodie, looked up from the little floor mat where he had been attempting to think of what he should say to Toga, Mei, and his mother if he had the opportunity to see them at that time. When he saw who Lambeth had let through the door, his eyes grew wide. Eren, John and Naomi got up and prepared to fight as everyone else hurried to their feet. With his hair disheveled from the storm and his coat soaked from the rain, the man gave a single nod. He appeared worn out, but the people in the room weren't shocked. He pulled a chair out of the kitchenette and sat down, exhaling slowly, saying, Hey y'all, nice to finally meet ya. Took me longer than I like to get things fixed up. Except for Izuku, everyone got up and sat back in their chairs. Izuku got up, clumsily. I was going to call, I just. Eren, I know, interrupted softly. You didn't want to drag anyone else in. You were trying to protect people. Unsure of what to say, Izuku nodded slowly. Eren simply retrieved a folded newspaper from his coat and placed it on the table. The bold headline, grainy silhouettes, and a blurry picture of the shipyard were displayed on the front page. Unknown vigilantes cause explosive chaos, heroes clean up mess. Izuku flinched. Shinso rubbed the back of his neck, Naomi remained silent, John merely grinned, and Lambeth whistled loudly. Eren simply gave him a look. Softly, then, they're wrong. Izuku blinked. What? Eren folded his arms and leaned back. You did the right thing. Y'all did the right things every single move. Y'all were careful. Y'all were smart. You saved lives. And that article. He touched the paper. That's just what the system prints when it's embarrassed it didn't get there first. Preach! Shouted John as Naomi prodded him. Izuku's throat grew constricted. But, we broke the law. Eren remarked, laws don't save people, Izuku, people do. The words were clear, sharp, and somehow accurate. They struck like lightning. Unsure of how to react, Izuku sat down slowly. I thought you'd be mad. That you'd want me to stop. Eren had a thin, unreadable smile. I didn't teach you to wait for permission. I taught you to see the cracks in the world. And you acted. That's more than most ever do. Anyways, y'all, let's get going. We're heading back to community center. I did some digging in the authorities and we're mostly cleared. With you wearing a mask, an amount of people who have Quirk with a book are high. Meaning you're not on their radar at all, and if they did come knocking at your door, you was Lambeth shop that night. However, we got something to discuss and sort through. Eren said while clasping his hands together. He pointed to John and remarked, especially you big guy, we need to talk about you, your sis, and your little brother. Along with everyone else, John rolled his eyes as they started packing and leaving, but, Izuku. Izuku's voice was low as he gazed at the tabletop. Then why does it feel wrong? There was a slight softening of Eren's expression. Because you still believe the world is fair. He extended his arm and firmly touched Izuku's shoulder. His words, this wasn't your last rescue, not if you're serious about changing things. You think this is the only warehouse like that? The only ring? The only victims? You opened the door, kid. Now you have to decide if you're going to walk through it. Izuku raised his head. I want to help, I just don't want to become. Eren added, a villain? Izuku gave a nod. Eren's smile had a darker undertone this time. You're not a villain. You're a solution the system doesn't want to admit it needs. He got up, gave Izuku a gentle back pat, and headed for the door. Let them. He added before departing, the world will call you wrong, just because you didn't wait your turn. After that, he left the apartment. For a moment, Izuku sat silently as the words echoed in his chest, but then he heard Shinso's voice calling for him, which made him get up and follow everyone else. He wasn't sure if he should feel uncomfortable or empowered. Later that evening beyond the edge of the rooftop, the city skyline glowed faintly and restlessly under a sky smudged by clouds and light pollution, and Izuku could hear the soft hum of power lines buzzing overhead, the occasional car honking, and a distant siren. With his knees drawn to his chest and his book floating silently next to him, pages fanning in the breeze as if it were breathing, he sat on the community center's roof ledge. He just got done with May threatening to implant a GPS tracker in his skin, Toga subtly urging him to never do that again, and his mother crying over him. For the first time since the rescue, everything was quiet, without any orders, plans, or adrenaline. And the shame. But he didn't feel bad about worrying his family and friends. No, it was more profound than that. How many people live in cages without bars? People who wouldn't be saved by broadcast alerts or pro-heroes? He asked himself as he looked out across the rooftops. He might have even changed the lives of some of them. However, nothing had changed in the world. The traffickers would rebuild, the system that allowed that warehouse to remain in operation continued to flourish. The girl with the Cyclops eye would recall that cage long after her injuries had healed, and he would never forget the angry, hollow look in Naomi's eyes after she had been set free. He had fallen short. A voice said, "You're brooding," from behind him. Izuku said, "I earned it." Without turning. The silence between them was no longer tense, but shared as Shinso walked over and sat next to him, arms folded across his knees. You believe it's more real because of the guilt? Shinso inquired. No, Izuku replied. I think it means I understand what it cost. Shinso gave a slow nod, saying, you accomplished something amazing. Put your life in danger. Saved lives that no one else would have known about. However, you cannot continue to burn yourself alive in order to keep others warm. I don't want to be a hero, Izuku said, not like the ones on TV. So what do you want to be? Said Shinso, tilting his head. Someone who can look suffering in the eye, and not flinch, Izuku said, gazing at his hands. Someone who supports me even when it hurts. I simply don't know how to accomplish that without turning into the person I despise. After a brief period of silence, Shinso remarked, that's why you need us. Izuku looked over at him. You don't need to work it out on your own. You are not forced to choose between apathy and martyrdom. May, Toga, Lambeth, Eren, and I will all help you carry it. If you really ask, I believe John and Naomi are also on your side. Every one of us. Izuku exhaled slowly, and the burden somewhat decreased. He said, then help me build something better, something tangible. A purposeful action, not a slight alteration in behavior. Shinso gave a nod. I'm with you bro. After midnight, East Naruhata was a city built on anticipation. Izuku Midoriya was huddled behind a vent shaft, knuckles white against the edges of his open notebook. 3 rooftops from a glowing illegal Quirk lab. His mind was racing, and he was unaware that the cool night air was stirring his hair. What a low-level villain ring would want was a squat, ugly warehouse below them, resembling a condemned utilities site with patched-over windows and a single flickering security light. Next to Izuku, Hitoshi Shinso, who wore a gray and black support suit, soft tread boots, and a lightweight utility belt, light enough to run, heavy enough to fight, knelt silently, eyes sharp under his visor, his right hand resting on his grapple gauntlet, the other tapping the side of a small coil mounted on his throat. Eren was standing with his arms folded behind them, his face unreadable, his eyes searching the horizon as if he were waiting for the city to move first. Eren stated, 4 confirmed in the main lab, with 2 guards in front. They're holding cells and packing suppression agents, perhaps abductees. With a head tilt, Shinso said, are you certain? There was no need for Eren to respond. Plan of entry? Izuku inquired. In 90 seconds, breaking. Not a single alarm. No blood unless absolutely required. After this, they are not allowed to rebuild. With his fingers hovering over a marked page, Izuku opened his notebook and let the pages hover, the paper shimmering with a faint green aura, its glyph like energy lines glowing faintly with each flick. That's the guy on the right, he muttered, static pulse. I'll take the other, Shinso said, tapping the voice splicer, a new device Mei had given him, on his throat. I have a recording of one of their voices, near enough to lure him in. Eren nodded slightly and fell quietly to the alley below. You getting too good at this, Shinso said, letting out a breath. Izuku smiled slightly and said, I think we both are. Shadows swallowed them whole as they fell in perfect sync after Eren. The front guards paced idly outside the loading bay door, unaware, while Izuku veered left and Shinso to the right at the bottom of the stairwell. Taking a position behind a dumpster, Izuku opened his notebook, and with a silent mental command, the book hovered next to him, its cover glimmering momentarily as the stored Quirk page came to life, the chosen page fluttering outward like a wing. And then a concentrated arc of electromagnetic energy shot forward from the notebook's surface. The guard's back was struck by the pulse. Izuku waved 2 fingers, and the notebook floated to intercept the fall, cushioning the man's landing as he jerked, spasmed, and collapsed against the wall with a strangled grunt. He was stunned, not dead. Shinso came out of the darkness across the way. Yo, where's your badge again? He said, pressing a button on the splicer, which produced an exact replica of the first guard's voice. Rolling his eyes, the second guard turned and said, Huh? Wait, what? It's too late, he had answered. The guard stiffened. Shinso's eyes glowed dimly. Lie down, said Shinso. The man immediately obeyed, falling like a puppet with its strings severed. I still hate doing that, Shinso sighed. He said, You're a lifesaver, and Izuku joined him, no alarms. In their earpieces, Eren's voice crackled softly, 2 minutes, go. None of them had anticipated the lab level. The air was sickly yellow from rows of blinking consoles, syringes stacked on carts, and chemical vats bubbling with suppression fluid. 3 lab-coated individuals were keeping an eye on gauges, while 2 others pulled a blood-matted, unconscious teenager into a rusted cage. Izuku's mouth tightened. Izuku, Shinso, take left, Eren murmured from the distant entrance. I'll break in from behind. Izuku nodded and flipped through his notebook in his mind, lifting and hovering on a particular page. Oil sweat is a quirk. Releases a high-slip substance from the skin, which impairs mobility and increases the risk of falls. Weakness. Absorbent foam, used for suppression in confined spaces. Izuku, the notebook floating next to him, mentally activated the chosen page as he took a tiny capsule from his belt, a foam grenade that Mei had helped design. The energy of the book pulsed, sending a green streak into the capsule as he rolled it through the vent grate, and a glowing sigil formed in the air. The slick coating on the lab floor instantly solidified into traction-killing sludge as the grenade exploded with a soft foom, releasing a cloud of glowing dust and hardening foam. One tech grabbed a thin strip of paper that was starting to solidify in her hand, while the other 2 staggered and collided with equipment. Izuku quickly examined the peculiarity. Paper cut is a quirk. Mid-range slicing projectiles made from hardened paper. Weakness. Unstable in motion or wind, disrupts vision. Izuku was already in motion when the guard threw the shard of paper at him. In midair, a page flipped and came to life. Chalk dust is a quirk. Obstructs vision by releasing a cloud of dry powder from a focal point. Duration. 6 seconds. Range. 3 meters. The notebook exploded with white dust, shrouding Izuku in a dense mist. The blade failed to hit. Shinso stepped forward with his grapple gauntlet raised as the woman coughed and flailed blindly, launching the hook into a support beam and yanking himself forward, swinging through the dust cloud and drop-kicking the guard to the ground. He grunted, that's 3, and landed next to Izuku. Izuku whispered, thanks, I still hate being in the smoke. A few seconds later, Eren broke through the far wall and dragged 2 more captives, teenagers who were breathing but unconscious, and one tech attempted to escape but was struck in the chest by one of Shinso's grappling blows. Shinso snarled, you're not going anywhere, Eren yelled, charges set, and ordered the children to leave, now. The exit corridor was too narrow. Shinso cleared the path, grapple gauntlet firing with precise arcs, and they heard boots clomping behind them. Reinforcements. While Izuku's notebook hovered beside him, protecting his flank as he piggybacked the first boy toward the stairwell. Izuku turned a new page and sent his book forward. Magnetic pulse is a quirk. Within 5 feet, pushes or pulls ferrous objects. Apply to door frames or environmental targets. The book pulsed upward and glowed. The lead pursuer was overturned when a rusted air vent fell from the ceiling onto him. The walls behind him went colorless, flickering like old TV static, and another enemy came toward, this one with a swirling aura of grayscale trailing from his fingers. Izuku used Nen to better shield his eyes, but Shinso wasn't so fortunate, blinking slowly and becoming disoriented. The notebook flipped to a blank page and snapped shut, protecting Izuku's eyes by hovering over Shinso's shoulder. After dropping a smoke pellet, Shinso pulled them both through the upper hallway exit using his grapple. As the detonators blew, they came out onto the roof. Flames surged from subterranean vents, casting long shadows across the rooftops, and the explosion was deep and surgical, just enough to bring down the lab's active systems without damaging the holding cells. Eren watched it all burn from the edge. Izuku bent down and put the boy down gently, while his notebook hovered above, performing a diagnostic scan, another feature May had assisted him in installing with a biosignal trick they had found last month. Stable vital signs. Slight concussion, he said, we got him. This doesn't feel like victory, Shinso said, pacing without his helmet and perspiring. Simply put, it feels like cleanup. Eren remained motionless. We interfered with supply lines. Saved 3 children. That's a victory. You mentioned 2 guards, Izuku said, glancing at the cratered skyline. 4 were present. Eren said, pressure teaches. I said what you needed to hear, Eren said. Both of you adjusted. With clenched fists, Shinso said, that's manipulation. That's getting ready. I won't be here working with you one day. John, Lambeth, Naomi, or anybody else will not save you. I have to prepare you all for whatever may arise. Izuku gazed intently at his notepad. The pages were already blank again. The quirk entries, however, remained in his mind. Like scars, locked in. East Naruhata floated on below them, windows lit, sirens far away, and the smoke that had filled the warehouse hours before nowhere to be seen. Leaning back, Izuku looked across the street at the neighborhood. There was still a faint glow in the community center. The night janitor, Ms. Iroha, was most likely locking up the kitchen. As usual, he would see her again in a few hours, working hard before school started. As he had done all semester, she would let him in early to assist with sorting the breakfast crates. He wasn't asked to, it was just a natural instinct. After that, school. Then, like all 14-year-olds, he took an afternoon stroll home. Then perhaps, just possibly, Eren would call again and he would be back in a mask, standing in another alleyway, hunting down another danger that the heroes refused to confront. His life had taken on an odd rhythm, volunteering before school, writing quirk theory in class, studying behind closed doors, and working patrols at night, and nobody around him knew what it was. Even UA wasn't where he was. Not yet. Didn't even know if he would go. It was nearly comical. Eren remarked, you've been quiet. Izuku gave a shrug. Just tired and thinking. Eren gave him a look. About what? School. High school, I mean. UA is still on the table, but it's not the only one. Support course makes sense. Maybe Ketsubutsu. Or Shiketsu. Or even a regular school with an internship. You're not going to a regular school. Izuku chuckled briefly. You say that like it's settled. Eren remained expressionless. You've already outgrown the system, Izuku. You just haven't realized it yet. Izuku glanced at his hands. Or maybe I've gone too far outside it to ever get back in. Eren simply shrugged his shoulders without responding. Izuku eventually produced a second notebook, a blank one with sturdy sleeves and a reinforced binding. Beside it, the quirk book hung open once more, flickering softly. I started rewriting the transformation pages, he stated. Eren's eyebrows went up. Oh, I've been avoiding them, Izuku acknowledged without apology. Most of the quirks I log are emitter types, projectiles, energy outputs, bursts, movement tools. Stuff the book can fire or deploy. Anything that relies on internal or bodily changes feels wrong. Like the book isn't meant to handle it. Eren approached and took a seat next to him. That's because transformation quirks aren't about activation. They're about becoming, and your book doesn't know what that means. Izuku gave a nod. Exactly. The emitter stuff's easy. Direction, range, effect. I can instruct it. But transformation quirks aren't aimed, they're lived in. Flipping through a page, he displayed a crude diagram of a quirk user in the middle of their shift, a muscular enhancement quirk that caused their bones to crystallize for 5-minute bursts. The book can copy the result. It can even reproduce the glow. But the moment I try to activate it, nothing. No output. No sync. Leaning forward, Aaron started using a piece of chalk he kept in his coat to draw a circle on the rooftop. I've been thinking about that. You've trained the notebook to be a launcher, a turret, a projector. But if you want to move into transformation quirks, you're going to need a new operating system. Izuku's head cocked. You mean mentally? I mean fundamentally. After completing the circle, he drew 6 pointed symbols, one open square, looped arrows, and sharp triangles along its edge. This is a model based on Nen. Ancient, pre-Quirk era. You've heard of it? Izuku gave a nod. A little. It's about intent, right? Energy shaping through discipline. Aaron grinned. Close enough. Nen is how you teach energy to obey character, not command. If you can teach your notebook to follow intent, not just trigger phrases, it'll be able to handle transformations. Leaning in, Izuku examined the shapes. Walk me through it? Aaron pointed to the triangle at the top. You remember the hexagon I showed you 6 different men types L? Yes, they are. Enhancement. Improving an existing quality, such as durability, strength, or speed. Emission. Launching Nen outward. This is what my book does with Emitter's quirk, though it's never as powerful as the original users. Manipulation. I only control the book, not any other external objects or behaviors. Conjuration is the process of creating something from nothing, my book. Transmutation is the process of altering something's nature. Anything that doesn't neatly fit into the other categories is considered specialization. Aaron gave a nod. You're a conjurer, remember. When you use emitter quirks you're using emission. Which is your opposite Nen affinity, but you fixed that by adding a Nen constriction by having the book have the quirk, not you. Still you only get a fraction from emission quirks. So when you use an emitter quirk the book is locked in emission mode. It listens to cues and fires stored quirks like bullets. But transformation quirks don't want to be bullets. They want to be threads woven into form. Izuku took a seat back. So if I train the book to follow transmutation or enhancement logic, it might be able to reshape or sustain a quirk instead of just firing it. Exactly. But that'll take time. You'll need new commands. A different flow of energy. You'll have to teach it that transformation quirks are states, not bursts. Izuku started drawing the 6-point diagram after flipping to a blank page. I'll start with basic ones. Bone density shift. Hair armor. Surface hardening. Low-level stuff. Aaron got up. And you'll need a test subject. Volunteer type. Someone you can study safely. Izuku considered Shinso. Of Shino. Of himself. I'll figure it out. Aaron turned to go. Good. Because you won't survive what's coming next with just emitter types. As the sun started to rise, Izuku sat by himself with his notebook humming softly next to him and the pages slowly starting to turn themselves. Later in the week the clanking ceased. Izuku glanced up from the greasy schematics in time to see Mei Hatsume emerge from behind the blast door with her arms extended as if she had just welcomed a member of the royal family. Which she had, in a sense. Look! Mei exclaimed, her hair charred at the ends and her goggles hazy. The culmination of 3 sleepless nights, 17 failed ignition cores, and 1 very expensive caffeine drip. She whistled and reached back. A sleek, black and chrome owl with bright blue eyes rose from the shadows of her desk and spread its wings. With a soft, metallic screech, it moved forward, smooth and silent, like a miniature predator drone. It sat on the edge of Izuku's table, its talons clicking lightly against the floor. Izuku blinked. No way. Izuku recognized the owl's design because it was one he had created about a month prior. At the same time Mei was attempting to create the tiny dragon. Seeing the dragon made me want to pull out a D&D character. Oh yes way. Mei smugly replied. Meet model Hoazuki Unit 1. But I call him Zuki. The owl blinked after cocking its head 90 degrees. User. Midoriya Izuku. Target tracking online. Danger ratio. Moderate, based on stress levels. Should I recommend breathing exercises? Izuku blinked once more. He talks? With a proud, full adaptive AI, Mei slapped its side like a car salesman. Behavior matrix linked to your combat logs, sensor array, vocal tone analyzers, and about 3 dozen neural net algorithms I definitely borrowed without permission. The owl's feet moved. Also, hi. I dream of devouring satellite dishes and ascending to the cloud. He's joking, Mei noted with a hand gesture, probably. Loud, exhausted, and genuine, Izuku laughed. You built me a familiar. She arched an eyebrow. Like the D thing. Exactly, a magical assistant. A helper with personality, tracking, even basic utility. May flipped a switch on the owl's wing and said, well, but mine has taser talons, camouflage feathering, and a mini EMP burst mode. He's your magical support owl, but make it support course plus Hatsume May brilliance. As if listening, Izuku's hand moved to his side and the quirk analysis book hovered softly. He laughed. A thought flashed into his mind. An actual concept, a significant one. From the back, he took out a blank page, which he typically saved for fresh entries. Rather, he took a pen from May's messy desk and wrote, Hoazuki Familiar Protocol, 001, on the top. He then sketched the logo underneath it, which was a gear fused with a crescent moon, which he and May had doodled as a joke months prior. Their ideal business. One day, when they weren't just background kids, they promised to build the place. Sign it with me. May blinked. Wait, seriously? He gave a nod. Izuku blushed greatly as she said, we made this together, not just a tool. Not just a side project. A step toward our dream. She gave him a gentle, vulnerable glance before grabbing the pen. Well, don't cry about it, Izu. May reddened profusely. Both of them signed. Izuku carefully wound the page like a sash around the metal frame of the owl. The book throbbed. Once, twice. The page was destroyed by fire. In light, not in fire. Within a heartbeat, the owl trembled, its wings quivering. Its eyes widened, and for the first time, it blinked like a conscious being rather than a machine. His eyes changed to resemble May's, but they were the same color as Izuku's. May retreated. Did you do something? I don't know. I was just, Izuku said, glancing at the book, which returned to his side with an odd sense of peacefulness. Inside, the page changed shape, glowing a little now, integrated, encoded. He held up his hand. The book opened. With wings extended, Hoazuki reappeared in a flash of green-blue glyphs. The owl said, Izuku Midoriya, in a lighter, more sly tone. Designation. Dad 1.0, Nerd Sorcerer. Sub-descriptor. High potential emotional liability. Priority directive. Stay alive so Mom 1.0 doesn't lose another prototype. May's laughter choked her. May jumped up and down, exclaiming, Did he just call me Mom 1.0? My baby knows it's mommy? The owl's head turned. Correction. Founding Maternal Developer Unit 1. But Mom 1.0 is faster. Izuku gazed with wide eyes. He wasn't like this before. May said, Nope, her eyes wide. That's new, and terrifying, and perfect. That signed page, etched with purpose, connection, and a common vision, had, without either of them realizing it, produced something more profound. A Nen vow. A summoned familiar bound by partnership and purpose. Izuku no longer simply called forth a machine. He called forth a fragment of both his future and her. Izuku said, Welcome to the team, Zuki, with pride. About time, answered the owl. Now let's make something explode. Later in the month, even though John's apartment complex was only 8 stories high, it felt like a world away. When they were unable to meet elsewhere, they did so there. No patrols. No instructors. Just quiet truth and a blank sky. With his hoodie zipped up and the wind pulling at his sleeves, Izuku leaned against the railing. His notebook was closed and dark, hovering close to his shoulder. Since arriving, he had not spoken. Trevon and John weren't present at the time. They went outside to get the group some food. John has been employed at the community center as a security guard, which is preferable to serving as an enforcer for neighborhood gangs. Given that Trevon frequently stops by the shelter. Naomi balanced her sketchpad on her knees while sitting cross-legged on a nearby folding chair. Tonight, she wasn't drawing. Just drawing. More of a habit than an action. Behind them, Shinso paced along the roof's edge, his boots making a scuffing sound on the concrete. The silence was broken by Shinso, who stated, I'm not trying to be the bad guy here, but we need to talk about this. Seriously. Izuku remained motionless. Shinso took a step forward. The raids. The stakeouts. All of it. It's important. But this isn't sustainable, Izuku. You know that. Izuku spoke in a low voice. So what are you saying? Just stop. I'm saying this can't be the whole plan. Naomi put down her pencil and spoke in a quiet but confident tone. He's right. What we're doing now, it matters. But it's patchwork. We're reacting to things the world keeps breaking. If we want to fix it, we have to get ahead of it. Izuku slowly turned around. And how are we supposed to do that? Go pro. Be heroes. You've seen what they ignore. I know, said Shinso. But we can still change the game, from the inside. Izuku's thumb brushed the edge of his notebook as he looked down. I don't know if I'm cut out for that. Naomi got up. Why not? He took a while to respond. Because All Might looked me in the eye, he concluded, and told me I couldn't be a hero. Because I've had to lie and fight in the dark just to do a fraction of what they ignored. Because maybe I'm better off not asking for permission anymore. Shinso took a step forward. Then don't. Don't ask for permission. Just show up. We've already proven we can do more with less. You with that book. Me with my voice. Naomi with her mind. Naomi gave a soft smile. Thanks, but I'm not going into the hero course. Izuku blinked. Wait, what? She shrugged. I got accepted to UA, but I'm going for general electives, law track. You'd be a better hero than half the people in the system, Shinso replied. Maybe, she uttered. But I want to change the system, not fight for it. Heroes punch symptoms. I want to dig out the roots. Izuku's arms were crossed. She's being modest. Naomi's probably the smartest one out of all of us. Naomi gave an eye roll. You're just saying that because I actually read the penal code. They chuckled. Izuku even cracked a small smile. Shinso took a step forward. Listen, I already got into UA General Studies. I'm gonna transfer into the hero course after the sports festival. That's the plan. He looked at Izuku. I want you there with me. Izuku's throat grew constricted. I don't know if I'll fit. You will, expressed Shinso. Because I'll be there, and Naomi will be there. You won't be alone. Izuku gave them both a look. Beside him were two individuals who had fought. Had faith in him. Saw him, even though he had lost his identity. Okay, he muttered. I'll apply. Unaware that he was holding a breath, Shinso released it. Naomi grinned. About time. The wind increased once more. It felt different this time. Several months later only a sandbox, 2 benches, and trees with more bare branches than leaves made up the park, but it was quiet, and that was sufficient for tonight. The 2-story shelter where Himiko Toga currently resides was located across the street. Everyone simply called it what it was. A place where unstable Quirk users went to either get better or stay out of trouble. The sign said Quirk Stability Housing, Ward 3. Because of her circumstances, Toga found herself in the middle. She wasn't imprisoned. As long as she complied with the regulations, curfews, supervision, and supervised check-ins, she was free to come and go to school, and even meet with people. It wasn't a cage, but it also wasn't freedom. And she made good use of the little time she had on nights like this. As of right now, Izuku sat in the sandbox with his eyes fixed on the pages of his notebook that were hovering, wearing a hoodie that was too big. Dermal Harden, the quirk he had been attempting to activate, did not react. The glyphs pulsed like a dying heartbeat, but they glowed dimly. No shape. No change. Only static energy. He let out a sigh. A voice from behind him said, "You always make that face when you're frustrated." He turned to see Toga walking over with her hands in her coat pockets and a scarf around her neck. Her eyes glinted as if she knew something he didn't, and her smile slanted to one side. Unexpectedly, Izuku blinked. Hey, you made it. She stepped into the dust and immediately plopped down next to him, teasing, "You think I'd miss our weekly sandbox date? Honestly, I should be charging you for emotional support." His smile faded as he turned another blank page. "I mean, you are kind of my quirk therapist," he muttered. Toga's shoulder brushed his as she leaned sideways, "And yet, you still can't get your book to feel anything." He looked at her. "It's a tool, not a person." Her voice was gentle and playful as she leaned closer. "Then maybe you should stop treating it like a screwdriver and start treating it like a dance partner." He blinked quickly. "Wait, what does that even mean?" With a dramatic sigh, Toga flopped backward into the sand, her arms spread wide as if she were creating an angel out of snow. Transformation quirks don't care about rules, nerd boy. They care about rhythm, feeling, instinct. You don't tell them what to do. You invite them. Confused, Izuku cocked his head. Invite them? From where she lay, she glanced up at him. "Think about mine. I don't just look like someone. I feel their weight. Their voice. Their heartbeat. Their sadness." Her grin widened slightly. "I let them in, and then I let them out through me." He briefly looked at her before turning back to the page. "Toga, that's kind of beautiful." Despite rolling her eyes, she appeared to be secretly happy. "Don't get mushy on me. I'm still under government supervision." With a nervous but sincere laugh, Izuku returned his attention to the notebook. He didn't think like an analyst this time. He didn't search for conversion tables or ratios. He simply imagined what it would be like to be indestructible. To put himself in the way of something that would harm someone he cared about and not let them fall. The page glistened. The letters were curved. There were ripples in the air. Scales formed like armor across the edges of the notebook's hardened cover. The change had begun. Izuku gazed. It worked. Toga brushed off her coat and sat up slowly. Toga said with a little frantic joy, "Told you. You gotta stop thinking so much and start feeling alive." He smiled. "Guess I had the right teacher." Once more, she gave him a shoulder bump. "You're lucky I like nerds with dangerous notebooks." Half in jest, half inquisitive, he said, "Is that your type?" Toga grinned. "Wouldn't you like to know?" Above them, the wind rustled the dried leaves as it pushed through the trees. The city didn't seem to matter for a while. Only the park. Only the stars. Only them. After a beat with a hint of sand, she said, "I have an hour before curfew." To end the page, Izuku said, "Then we've got time to be alive. Let's go get some food, on me." Shinso's bedroom wall was illuminated by the glow from his computer screen, which painted everything in varying shades of blue and static gray. After the rooftop conversation, he was unable to fall asleep at almost 2 in the morning. Not when everything was swirling like that. He wasn't watching training videos or reading assignments. He participated in forums, threads for comments, websites that spread rumors. All of the tabs shared one characteristic: the child who reads. "Do you think he's a dropout hero student?" is the title of the thread. The topic of the thread is, HPSC deleting posts again, Book Kid Lab takedown not reported anywhere else. The thread's title is, He's like Batman if Batman had no money and anxiety. Shinso selected to open an additional link. Izuku is seen in a blurry picture from behind a chain link fence, with his notebook glowing and his hood up. The caption that was attached to it read, "The green flicker before the fall." Shinso gazed at it for quite a while. His friend was turning into a fictional character. A headline. A reason. However, none of these individuals knew the boy who frantically fumbled for his bus pass or who stayed up late perfecting notebook margins. They were unaware of Izuku Midoriya, the weary, unyielding, somewhat naive genius who continued to assist despite having every reason to do otherwise. Perhaps that was Shinso's biggest fear. He selected another tab, which he kept open more often than he would like to acknowledge. A moderated message board has a pinned post with the title, Unofficial Vigilante Tracking, Confirmed Activity Logs. By using aliases such as Notebook Ghost, Greenlight, and The Book Kid, 12 incidents were recorded thus far. 12 raids or rescues were successful. No casualties have been confirmed. Not a single arrest. No oversight by the hero. A dozen miracles. There are 12 warning signs. Naomi had referred to it as momentum. "It's a storm waiting to happen," Shinso said. Weary, he rubbed his face. "Izuku," he whispered to himself, "you're going to get yourself erased." A tiny news ticker flicked by in the corner of his screen. UA public announcement. General Ed student moved to hero course transfer based on performance. Shinso's jaw was set purposefully, but he did not smile. "I'm gonna make it in, and I'm not leaving you behind." He made a screen-off click. The light went out, however, the movement's weight persisted. Hawks. Division of Covert Monitoring with his boots resting on the desk, Keigo Takami. Hawks leaned back in his chair and gazed for the 4th time at the grainy security footage from Naruhata District. Identical warehouse. From the outside, the same window shattered. The interior is also scorched. A hero response was not recorded. No bad guys are taking the credit. There were no known oddities noted at the scene. But there was a flicker of green light, frozen in the frame. A notebook that floats. Hawks narrowed his eyes and muttered to himself, "Every time." Online, the buzz was growing louder. Someone had fed a myth to the internet, which was a machine. Book Kid. Notebook Ghost. The Green Ripple. Myths didn't appeal to him. Myths diverted people's attention. Additionally, there was a personal touch to this vigilante, known. A second screen appeared, an internal Quirk use registry, and he swung his chair around. There was nothing that moved like the notebook. No telekinesis. No peculiarities in the construct. There were no emitter signatures to account for its shape changes or hovering. He bent over. He tapped a pen to his lip and whispered, "Who are you?" He didn't want to silence the child, not just yet. Heck, perhaps he would assist him, however, he was observing. UA Eraserhead. Report on faculty investigation. In one of UA's guarded teacher lounges, Eraserhead, Shota Aizawa, stood with his arms folded in a loose scarf around his neck, facing a hollow display. A map of verified vigilante interventions with 6 tagged by the same unidentified person was displayed in the file on the screen. Floating object. Glowing glyphs. Minor suppression. No injuries. No ID. To move on to the next screen, he clicked. A chart of patterns. Timeline. Reports from witnesses. Testimonies from children. Additionally, the same phrase keeps appearing in the notes. He had a notebook. Not a solo operator, mumbled Aizawa. Too clean, must have guidance. The timeline caused him to narrow his eyes. Whoever this child was, he was going after gaps in the system. Areas where minor offenses had slipped through the cracks and where the HPSC had neglected to investigate. He wasn't making trouble, he was sealing off leaks. Even though he wasn't always working alone, he was always the reliable one. The thing that worried him the most was that, since it made him think of himself. Aizawa grabbed his cell phone. Voice memo. To Nezu. I'd like to request access to student application data for middle schools in Naruhata Ward. Specifically any quirkless applicants with abnormal behavior patterns or enhanced tactical aptitude. He hesitated. And maybe check in with our general studies candidates, just in case. A few weeks prior to the start of high school. It was a thin envelope. Not the bulky, gold-encrusted type Izuku had always dreamed of as a child. A simple letter. The UA typed the return address and admissions information in a clean box. In the corner is a barcode. He sat quietly and motionless on his bedroom floor with his legs crossed and a notebook floating next to him. He held the envelope in his hands as if it were a mine. He was already aware of it. Before it had even arrived, he had checked the portal 3 times. Agreed. He was recommended to meet with the faculty of the support course after completing the general studies course, citing his demonstrated technical aptitude. It ought to have seemed like a dream. Rather, it was like a burden. Flashback. A decade ago. It was raining on the roof. There were puddles between the tiles and streaks on the metal guardrail from the recent rain. Izuku knelt next to the edge, huddled in close, hands shaking. Papers were soaked and his backpack was open. Sitting limp and ruined in his lap was his notebook, the one that contained old All Might trivia and Quirk analysis. He had just returned home from the incident at the beach. I just heard those words. I'm sorry, you can't be a hero without a quirk. Then he hadn't cried. No, not before All Might. Now, though? By yourself? His lungs hurt from crying so much. He then opened to a page that was blank. As he wrote the title, his hand trembled. Plan B. Preserve human life regardless. He scribbled the word, plan, out, but then again. Until there was just one word left. Make a reservation. He had no idea what it would turn into. He simply knew that he would create his own power if the world refused to grant it to him. He turned to the following page. Quirk number 001. Detonation type. Observed pattern, short temper, ground-focused explosions. Needs palms. Sweat-based. Limitation. Overexertion. The book started on that day. He stopped waiting for approval on that day. In present, Izuku gazed at the missive. His name was visible to him. Could see the future that everyone insisted he deserved, and he could see, accepted. He simply was unable to determine whether it was his. As it drifted closer, the notebook touched his shoulder. It pulsed softly, as if to nudge him along. He pulled the envelope open. Go over the letter. Didn't grin, did not cry. The pages turned themselves, quietly and faithfully, as they had since the day he vowed to save people anyhow, and he just sat there, breathing. The purpose of UA General Studies was not to achieve fame. The wing was located on the north side of campus, beyond the hero course's shining towers and the support division's bustling workshops. This place had older walls without fancy auto-locking doors or reinforced steel. Only recycled air that was always a bit too cold, sun-faded posters about quirk safety, and rows of ordinary desks. Izuku Midoriya was seated in room 3C, third row from the windows, 2 seats behind Hitoshi Shinso. His notebook, the notebook, was on his lap under the desk, angled just enough to record the civics lesson from today while monitoring the movements of the surveillance drone outside. Shinso listened with the drab concentration of someone who had heard it all before, sitting largely motionless with his head resting on one hand. His capture scarf retractor, which was fastened to his belt, hummed softly. Like background noise, the rest of the class had grown accustomed to the sound. Michelle was the only one who ever looked at him twice. Michelle Sato was brand new. Moved from London. Her shoes are always polished, her uniform is pressed, and her accent is sharp, as if she could be called before a camera at any time. She was identified as a member of an international partnership program by the red stripe on her UAID badge. Most children were unsure of how to interpret her. She was obviously intelligent, perhaps too intelligent, but she hardly ever lingered long enough to allow anyone entry. She and the civics instructor got into a heated argument today about a 2030s Quirk legislation bill. "With all due respect, sir," Michelle said, her voice echoing throughout the room like a sound, "the revision of Article 12 wasn't a simplification. It was a strategic narrowing of what counts as public endangerment. And it disproportionately affected those with physical transformation quirks. The data proves it." A graying man with horn-rimmed glasses and the exhausted air of someone who had long since stopped being taken aback by teenagers, the teacher sighed. "That will be discussed next week, Miss Sato." Michelle tapped her stylus against her tablet and asked, "Will it? Or will we just move on to Quirk history in the Eastern Bloc again?" Some of the students laughed. Shinso grinned slightly but kept his head down. Naomi sat in the room's corner. She appeared to be a recluse wearing a hoodie, but that was the only time anyone ever made that mistake. She was honest about who she was. Her chair's legs were encircled by her long, black, obsidian tail, which twitched languidly like a cat's. Her eyes, black, large, and speckled like stars, seemed to contain too much depth for a human face, and patches of faintly iridescent scales shimmered along her cheekbones. She was stunning in the way that space was stunning, icy, mesmerizing, and terrifying. Nobody sat close to her. With an expression that suggested she already knew the outcome, Naomi watched Michelle and the teacher while twirling a pen between her fingers. Another reminder that her quirk wasn't for show. The angular ridges of scale and bone that climbed her forearms were visible through the hoodie sleeves, which were pushed up just enough. No one questioned her about it. No one ventured. In contrast, Izuku had become accustomed to her silent presence. He appreciated that she didn't give a damn if people avoided her or stared at her. The tension belonged to her. People listened to it. He took a look out the window. He muttered under his breath, 3 new drones since Monday. Naomi hesitated with her pen. Heat lenses. Thermal mapping. High range. Possibly biochemical sniffers too. Shinso's head moved just enough to indicate that he was paying attention. However, he remained silent. The bell rang. Since general studies students were not permitted to use the main cafeteria during busy times, they crowded into the courtyard for lunch, with the majority congregating around the concrete benches and older vendor booths. Without a word, Michelle disappeared, heading quickly toward the admin tower while holding her tablet. With silent aggression, Naomi threw herself onto a bench and ripped open a ball of rice. Eyes half closed, Shinso leaned against a nearby column. Half watching a support drone buzz overhead, Izuku sat across from Naomi. With a nod in the direction Michelle had taken, Naomi stated, "She's not trying to blend in, she's probing the walls." "She's not from here," stated Izuku. "She probably wants to figure out what the system really is." Shinso abruptly said, "She already has," raising her voice for the first time since class. "That's why she's testing it, to see if it breaks." He caught a glimpse of Naomi's star-glinting eyes, but she remained silent. "I just used one clawed finger to open another rice ball." Once more, the group fell silent. Not tense, not friendly. Simply be silent. The silence between children who have witnessed too much and are wise enough to keep their words to themselves. The last thing Naomi said was, "The teachers are nervous." "Yeah," muttered Izuku. "They're expecting something." "Or someone," Shinso said, glancing across campus at the Hero Course building. Izuku looked after him. In the outdoor training area, students from classes 1A and 1B were engaged in obstacle drills. They appeared to be from another planet, even from this distance, with their vibrant colors, yelling teachers, and cameras recording everything they did. What would happen if a thread did manage to get past all of this security? Izuku asked abruptly. Naomi spoke in a dry tone. "Depends on the threat." Shinso's head cocked. "Depends on whether they want to be seen." Their elective class later that afternoon covered Quirk ethics in emergency response. The situation was straightforward. One student had a powerful mobility quirk, but also a history of erratic flare-ups, a collapsing building, and few rescue options. The instructor questioned, should they be ordered to help even if it puts others at risk? Izuku remained silent. Shinso did the same. From the rear of the room, Michelle held up her hand. "Simply put, that's coercion," she stated. "You can't weaponize someone's body just because they're capable." Then Naomi raised her hand. "What if they want to help? but you won't let them because their quirk doesn't fit your clean narrative? The class shifted. The instructor blinked. It didn't get resolved. Nobody desired it to. Michelle left the classroom by herself after class. Pretending to check his tablet, Shinso hovered in the hallway. With her tail trailing behind her like a shadow belonging to something much larger, Naomi disappeared into the crowd. Izuku went to the tunnel leading to the dorms. His phone buzzed before he could get inside. Aaron Railyard. Tomorrow. Midnight. Zuki, Naomi, and you. Bring everything you need. Gazing at the message, he let out a slow breath and tucked the notebook into his jacket. He was living between the cracks now. To conclude the section, use this quote. The beginning is the most important part of the work, Plato. The smell of quiet violence and rust filled the rail yard. It was an old East Naruhata switching station that was half condemned, mostly gutted, and technically owned by a shell corporation connected to 4 different holding companies on the black market. Or, to put it another way, the ideal location for locating something unlawful. With his quirk analysis book hovering just above his left hand, Izuku Midoriya squatted behind a pile of shattered pallet crates. His fingers tapped through its index, its pages fluttering with silent, unnatural energy. Zuki, his AI owl companion, pulsed softly next to him, its eyes ringed with yellow alert. Zuki said in a low voice, 3 heat signatures in the main terminal, 1 is armed. 1 is pacing. 1 is at a console. Likely the technician. Izuku gave a nod. That console's probably running the suppression tech Naomi picked up on, if they're holding quirk users inside. According to Zuki, odds of detainment, 78%, Naomi squatted close by, her dark eyes gleaming like deep space in the distance. She maintained her balance by silently swaying her tail over the dusty ground. She remained silent, but Izuku recognized the slight flecks of the scale patches along her jaw and neck as a sign of concentration. Then, with hardly any noise, John came in from the rooftop. His boots cracked the gravel underfoot as he landed hard. Izuku's body stiffened as soon as he straightened up, not out of fear but just by being there. John had a very different appearance from Naomi. There was a faint metallic sheen to his skin, smooth and pale like mercury kissed with undertones of bruised purple. John's eyes were voids, solid black and without reflection, in contrast to Naomi's star-like eyes. Along the side of his neck, thin slits pulsed like gills. The sharp carapace covering his shoulders and forearms was hardly hidden by his coat. He wasn't trying to hide who he was, he didn't. When he said, "I counted 5 outside the scanner field," his voice was clipped and low. 2 up top. 1 on the lookout tower. They're not idiots. Naomi's head cocked. Want me to handle the sniper? John took a while to respond. He turned his gaze to Izuku instead. Directly, I didn't come for you, he said. I'm only here to make sure my sister doesn't end up carved open in some basement lab. I know, said Izuku. For a moment longer than was necessary, they looked at one another. John was the first to turn away. You get the tech and the data. We clean the field. That's it. Zuki gave one beep. Full sweep plan active. Shall I mark suppression frequencies? Do it, said Naomi. Izuku used Shadow Step, a temporary movement type ability from a villain he'd tagged 3 weeks prior, one of the book's quirks that was stored as they moved. His footsteps were muffled and light was slightly bent to blend into shadows by the thin layer of darkness that shimmered around his legs. Hovering close to his shoulder was Zuki. 3-minute duration. You'll be visible after that. Whispering, more than enough, Izuku said. John and Naomi moved like a well-coordinated hunting team around the perimeter. He followed her with heavier steps but no less grace, less like a scout, more like a weapon. While she moved with quiet fluidity, her tail poised like a blade. Dim blue light blinked from rows of data crates inside the terminal. Unaware and backlit, the technician tapped on a screen as power coils fed into a central station. With his rifle slack in his hands, another guard sat close to the door. The third circled nervously around a tiny holding cell that was barely visible. Izuku knelt down close to the far wall, turned on Echo Print, a sensory device that let him make a phantom map using audio feedback, and mentally pictured the entire arrangement. 3 captives, he whispered, using his Zuki link. All young. Collars. Breathing erratic. We have to get them out. Lower, Zuki hovered. Confirming. Also confirming. This place is a wiring hazard, a safety violation, and a bad Yelp review waiting to happen. Zuki's speaker crackled with John's voice. Stick to the tech. Naomi and I will deal with movement. No deaths, Izuku firmly answered. Don't give me rules. Then John started to move. Before he could yell, the pacing guard fell to the ground in a heap. John's clawed hand struck the man's throat with enough force to render him unconscious, but not so hard as to crush. It worked unsettlingly well. Naomi scurried past him, slamming him against the wall after curling around his ankle and tail whipping the rifle out of the second guard's grasp. Zuki's thin silver net pinned the technician to the console just as he turned to scream. With a quick flip of his book, Izuku activated Tech Override and ran in. The input was fried and the suppression controls were frozen as thin sparks rushed into the terminal from the pages. "System down," declared Zuki. "Collars disarmed. Prisoners breathing normally." Naomi knelt close to the prisoners, a boy and two girls, blinking and dazed. Without ceremony, she cut off their collars and smiled at each with a piercing, extraterrestrial grin. Her words, "You're okay now, we're ghosts. You never saw us." Zuki beeped. "Extraction window is 90 seconds. John said, "On it," as he jumped over the apparatus and headed for the rear exit. Izuku reached for the data drive, hesitating. He questioned, "You really don't care about them?" John turned to face the dark, his face unreadable. "They're not my people, but Naomi does. That's enough, for now." Outside, as they came to the edge of the rail yard and melted back into the alley grid of the city, Naomi reached into a device that anonymously called the police to the warehouse to pick up the captives, leaned against a wall, and bit into an energy bar. "You gonna give me another lecture, big brother?" John folded his arms. "You're reckless. I'm resourceful. You're attached." She didn't dispute it. Perched on a rooftop in the shadow of the city, Zuki blinked as he always did before declaring. "Mission complete. 0 casualties. 0 donuts." Mildly disappointed about the latter. Naomi flicked his wing and smiled. "Next time, you can choose the mission snack." In a deep AI voice, Zuki said, "Next time, I demand it." Izuku closed his notebook as he let out a breath. Izuku opened his notebook and carefully slid the data page in, copying the important details of the mission and allowing the memory to become woven into the structure of the Nen-bound book. It closed itself after a brief burst of gentle green light. He questioned John, "Did you ever want to do more than protect your own?" John grinned icily. "No, that's what makes me dangerous. The revolution is not an apple that falls when it is ripe. You have to make it fall. Guevara, Che." Except for the hum of power lines that stretched like skeletal fingers above them, the rooftop was quiet. Izuku was re-indexing quirks from the mission while sitting on the ledge with his notebook next to him. A few feet away, Zuki sat on the rail, its eyes unblinking and dim, low power mode on. For once, there was no sense of urgency despite the long shadows cast by the city lights behind them. With her arms folded and her eyes wide open, Naomi leaned against the railing next to him, staring at nothing in particular. After a single flick, her tail became motionless. She said, "You handled yourself well tonight," in a quiet voice. Izuku gave a shrug. "Could have been cleaner, always could be." They sat silently for a moment more, then he was taken aback by Naomi. "You know, John didn't always look like that." Izuku glanced over and blinked. She continued to stare into the darkness without turning her head. "We weren't born looking this strange. Not fully." The traits came in slowly. First the eyes. Then the scales. Tail. The bioenergy pulse came last. They said it was a secondary quirk, but really, it was just a gift from our father. Izuku didn't say anything. "Our mom," Naomi said with a small, nearly agonizing smile. She was beautiful. Not in a conventional way. She looked like something out of deep space, luminous skin, long limbs, silver hair that glowed faintly in the dark. People were scared of her. But she was gentle. Kind. She used to sing lullabies in a language I don't think was ever written down. She fell silent for a moment. "Our dad, rich, boring, human, had this fetish, I guess, for unique women. Helping the poor, he used to say. But it always came back to control. He picked out women like they were art pieces, collected them, controlled them. John and I and our younger brother, we all have the same mom and dad. He made sure of that." Izuku scowled. "That's gross," asked Naomi. "Yeah, it is. But it's also why John's so protective. Our mom died when I was 9. Our little brother, he was still a baby. And our dad? He didn't mourn. He just moved on and we haven't seen him in years, probably moved on to someone new to prey on." Scales shimmered beneath her fingertips as she rubbed her temple. "John swore no one would control us again. Not ever. That's why he acts like such an ass. But he means well. Especially with me and my brother." Izuku stood silently, unsure of how to respond. Once more, Naomi broke the silence. John likes you, you know. Not that he'll ever admit it. Izuku's head turned abruptly. Wait. What? She smiled a little. You're good to me. You're not scared of me. He notices that. Also, he's grateful to Eren. The security job gave him stability. Purpose. Something to do with all that rage besides breaking bones. Izuku gave a headshake. He's terrifying at times. He's traumatized, said Naomi. He's still figuring out what to do with being alive. There was another pause, this one more subdued. Finally, thank you, she said. For what? For being a friend, and for not asking me to be anything else. Izuku swallowed, taken aback by the significance of that. He gave a slight smile. Same to you. A drone buzzed by on patrol above them. Blinking back online, Zuki's eyes silently looked up at the sky. Naomi's tail curled behind her like smoke as she turned and headed for the stairwell door. Get some rest, Midoriya. Big things are coming. In the stairwell, she disappeared. Izuku's gaze lowered to his quirk book. Remaining energy from the override quirk pulsed faintly on the last page he had used. However, he wasn't thinking about the book, the mission, or even the information they had found. He was thinking about Naomi. John as well, and the kind of pain you've been carrying around for so long turns into armor. Class 1A at UA, again. As usual, the order arrived clipped and dry. Bakugo exploded a blast too near Todoroki's flank, but Eraserhead didn't flinch, pace, or raise his voice. Class 1A hastily repositioned itself. They were improving, sharper, more orderly. However, Aizawa's focus was on more than just form and firepower today. Ghosts were being measured. Coordinated vigilante activity had increased in Fukudashi sector, Hosu outskirts, and Naruhata. With unsettling efficiency, low-level villain operations, mostly trafficking and black market quirk enhancers, were destroyed. Hero agencies did not report any involvement. No certified professional was ever present. However, there was always evidence left behind, including tagged evidence, victims who were secured, and emergency signals that were activated just before local authorities could react. Not careless. Not at random. Trained. Aizawa had begun gathering the scant footage that was available, including body cams from patrol officers, drone captures, and street cameras. The majority had been cleaned by static or signal interference, but the silhouettes were the same in the pieces he was able to reassemble. Specifically, 1. The book. A small, slender figure, almost certainly a teenager. Wore a hood, occasionally a scarf, but always with the same glowing, floating object. A book that turned its own pages in midair and released bursts of energy of some sort. It's not your usual quirk signature. Not found in any registry. Codename. Book. Compact frame. Efficient movement. Tool or quirk-assisted flight object, possibly sentient, consistent in every recorded incident. They weren't alone, though. Nearly half of the operations featured another figure, who was always present when the star-eyed girl appeared but rarely engaged in combat or took the initiative. Tall. Strongly constructed. Body language that is quiet, alien-like. Never launched an assault, never said anything. Simply kept watch. Codename. Watcher. Height approximately 6 feet 11 inches. Unique physiology of aliens. Dense in muscles. Will participate but observes the majority. Present whenever subject. Starlight is in operation. Never seen without her. And then there was Starlight. She was barely more than a shadow on grainy film, but she was unmistakable. Eyes that glowed like deep space, dark skin that shimmered with scale-like patterns, a long tail, and sharp movements that were a strange combination of predatory instinct and human grace. The codename is Starlight. Frame of a teenager. Features of aliens. Ocular anomaly, glow pattern. Galactic, dermal shifts, and tail. Has carried out quick combat extractions and minor healing. Not careless, but tactical. The crowd's notable reaction was one of awe and fear. Aizawa was concerned by that response. The media wouldn't know what to do if the public couldn't decide whether to worship her or flee from her. Finally, there was still another. A boy. No evidence of ability, but always too close to be coincidence. Normal looking, average build, never seen in direct contact with the others, but seen inside secure areas, near the edges of at least 2 known raids. Echo is the codename. Present at 4 locations. Male human. Potential role of infiltration or lookout. The behavior is more akin to espionage and spying than pro-hero training. Perhaps an unidentified student or insider. Aizawa's eyes narrowed. This one, too cautious, too quiet, too subtle. Although he hadn't seen any of them on campus, he could tell by some of their body language that they were familiar. Advanced devices such as surveillance scramblers, signal jammers, and even AI-guided drones were used in a number of operations. Street-level vigilantes are not the source of that kind of technology. There's a builder in the group. A support class mind, perhaps. This indicates that this is infrastructure rather than just passion. And behind everything, another person was present. A non-acting figure didn't appear in every scene, but when they did, they were seated on rooftops or in far-off alleyways, always with their faces hidden by dark outerwear. However, they were observing everything. Observer is the code name. Age unknown. A human silhouette. Never participates. Frequently shows up during or following procedures. Thought to be coordinating or keeping an eye on things. Too composed for a novice. The tech support could be anyone, but the observer and watcher are obviously adults. However, the age range? The instruction? But the teenagers? It shouted, UA. Next to it. Conclusion. Adolescent or post-adolescent operatives make up the vigilante group. Extremely skilled. Perhaps coached by an unidentified mentor. Not formally registered. There were no casualties. The choice of targets aligns with reports from underground intelligence. The frequency of activity is rising. The suspected age group raises the possibility of a relationship with nearby educational institutions or private trainers. The UA, although not proven, involvement cannot be ruled out. The main oddity is that Watcher only shows up when Starlight is present. Protective actions. Not observed when operating alone. Implies an emotional or familial connection. Theory. Vigilante clusters developed on their own. Trained by a third party. At least one member is capable of command or strategy. Without warning Nezu, Aizawa encrypted the file and saved the log. Not just yet. He required more. He turned to face Class 1A, who were getting ready for their final round of drills. Only children. However, the ones that are out there? Who are the people behind the book? They were also children. They were also being taught how to survive a war by someone. There was nobody else in the corridor in the east wing of General Studies, bare linoleum floors, flickering lights, and the distant buzzing of a maintenance droid. With his eyes pulsing softly, Zuki hovered languidly over Izuku's shoulder, scanning the empty hallway in front of him. There are no cameras on this wing for another 7 minutes, and the hallway is clear with little foot traffic. According to Mom 1.0, if you want dramatic moments, you should choose locations with better lighting. Izuku emitted a tiny sigh of laughter. Tell me I'm not trying to be dramatic. You say that, but you're literally brooding with wind-swept hair right now. Sensors twitched toward the far corner as Zuki paused. Signature of incoming heat, tall, human, weary. Zuki dissolved and shimmered out of sight before Izuku could reply. When Izuku Midoriya turned the corner with his Quirk book tucked under one arm, he was not considering timing or fate. In any case, fate was waiting for him. The man approaching him had the appearance of someone straight out of a textbook. His face was distinctive even without the cape, and he was garish but upright. Yagi Toshinori. All Might. Izuku came to a complete halt. Good afternoon, All Might said, kindly but distantly. Didn't mean to startle you, young man. He also slowed, smiling lightly but politely. Izuku took a while to respond. He gazed, not in wonder, but as one might gaze at a shattered statue. You're All Might, he said, flatly and without emotion. With a small, weary, perplexed expression, the former symbol of peace asked, how do you KN? Izuku clenched his jaw and said, you don't remember me. Should I? All Might blinked. No, Izuku said, of course not, averting his gaze for a moment before turning it back. I wasn't significant. All Might paused at that. Izuku inhaled. It's been years since we first met, after the incident with the sludge villain. I was the child who questioned whether a hero could be someone without a quirk. A beat sounded, and All Might's face briefly lit up with recognition, not of Izuku, but of the present. The cautious man remarked, I remember, a few asked questions like that, and I did my best to be honest. You told me no, Izuku snapped, you told me it couldn't be done. That I ought to give up. All Might scowled and moved in closer, saying, it wasn't intended to be harsh. I wanted you to realize how risky this life is. I couldn't support you in doing something that could kill you. With a sour smile on his lips, Izuku shook his head. No, he replied, you simply didn't want the responsibility. A helpless child staring at you as if your hope was the last thing you wanted. Because it would have been your fault if I had been harmed while pursuing that hope, wouldn't it? All Might parted his lips, then shut them again. You talk about saving everyone, Izuku went on, suddenly sharpening his voice, but that was never true. The ones in front of you are saved. The ones that fit the story are saved. The ones you can be proud of are the ones you save. But me? He took a step forward. You looked at me and saw a problem to walk away from. All Might said, I was trying to protect you, in a firm but quiet voice. No, said Izuku, you were defending yourself. All Might's face shifted, the warmth fading, worry taking its place. You've been through something, he said slowly, something serious. Izuku said, I've seen what real saving looks like. It's not headlines. It's not capes. People who don't even know your name are bleeding in alleyways. Additionally, it appears when no one else does. With narrowed eyes, All Might asked, what do you mean by that, young Midoriya? Izuku's lips moved, but he didn't retract them. I understand why you said what you said, he whispered, and I understand why you left. But even though your message left people behind, you can't stand here now and pretend that it saved lives. I never promised perfection, All Might uttered. I said I would try. Izuku gave him a look. Furthermore, a boy of his age should never have had such a hard, icy, and disappointed gaze. He remarked, you tried, a pause, but you didn't try for me. The knife was that. All Might remained silent. The man who had carried the world felt small under someone else's gaze for the first time in a long time as he simply gazed at Izuku. Izuku passed him without saying anything more. Without a word, Zuki reappeared from the stairwell ahead, silently spreading its wings. For what could it say? Behind them, the hallway remained deserted. However, something had changed. All Might sensed it, too. When your heroes fall, you learn the truth. They were only men, unidentified. In the community center, the smell of old books, warm rice, and lavender floor cleaner filled the community center. Lambeth was folding flyers, humming softly to herself, when the late afternoon sunlight poured through the stained glass windows someone had put in last year, left over from a church that had been demolished in the West District, creating shifting patterns on the tiled floor of the common room. Having just finished her tea, Inko Midoriya sat nearby with a little stack of registration forms, watching the younger volunteers manage a group of active children through a learning game with marbles and magnets, including Trayvon, who was smiling, laughing, even, as he demonstrated to a boy how to construct a trap loop, the first time she had ever seen him so relaxed. Inko remarked, he's come out of his shell. Aaron nodded as he sat across from her, his coffee cold. Took a while. The child has a good heart. Needed room to think about it. After grinning, Inko said, it helps to be seen. Lambeth looked up. And it helps to have Naomi dragging you into team challenges and forcing you to talk during lunch. They chuckled. Aaron didn't. She's been good here, Lambeth continued, observing Naomi through the workshop's glass door. Her and John. Though they have different energies, both are steady. Anchors in different ways. Naomi's sharper than she lets on, Inko said with a contemplative nod. John, too, is not as aloof as he makes himself out to be. When he believes no one is looking, I can see how he observes Trayvon. As if he's learning the concept of safety by heart. Aaron gazed at his mug's rim. He remembers what it felt like not to have it, he stated. That's what keeps him grounded. There was silence for a while. A small repair crew worked on bikes near the lot, some of the older teens helped sort donations outside, and the community center hummed with quiet activity. A kind of harmony that came not from funding or supervision but from people coming day after day to support one another. Putting her hands together, Inko said, places like this, they matter. They do, said Aaron, however, there was a clipped quality to his voice. She gave him a close look, but Aaron initially remained silent. His eyes were focused on the fading light above them as he leaned back. He reiterated, they matter, but they are consistently the first to be disregarded. Always use what's left over to build. It's always expected to use crumbs to fix systemic issues. He didn't sound angry, it was worn out. Aaron, Lambeth said, looking up from her papers. No, it's okay, he said, shaking his head. I simply get sick of seeing politicians appear for a photo op and then vanish when funding runs out or pipes burst. They allow children to fall through gaps that are large enough to last a lifetime. When someone tries to climb out of their way, they then act shocked. You're not incorrect, Inko said, giving him a gentle glance. However, you're not by yourself either. After giving her a final glance, Aaron said, sometimes it feels like we are. Sometimes, she said with a gentle smile. Then you look around, though. John leaned against the doorway, unreadable but present. Naomi entered from outside, a smudge of paint on her arm, offering someone a spare mask. Trayvon laughed again, bumping shoulders with one of the others as they raced marbles down a cardboard ramp. And you remember why you stayed, she concluded. Aaron's gaze softened slightly. The sun sank behind the buildings outside. Inside, the lights flickered on, dim and flickering but steady. The days that followed were silent shards, light on the outside but heavy on the inside. Even before anyone spoke, Izuku sensed it. It all began yesterday after a false alarm went off at school. Drones hovered lower than usual, teachers paused too long before class, and hero course instructors walked the halls with clipped steps and tighter eyes, exchanging coded glances in the stairwells, not in the lesson plans or textbooks. There was an impending event. Furthermore, nobody wanted to say it aloud. Once a background hum, UA's security grid had started to pulse with more frequent sweeps. Michelle noted that student lockers now had motion sensors embedded in the base, and Shinso noticed a pattern in the surveillance sweep intervals, every 11 minutes, exactly. Naomi counted 4 new biometric scanners installed outside the Hero Course gym in a single week. With his arms folded and his eyes darting from drone to drone, Shinso muttered, "No one's told us anything," during lunch. "They won't," replied Naomi. "If they're hiding something, it means they don't know how to stop it." It wasn't paranoia, but preparation, the kind you feel in your bones before a storm, Izuku said, as he sat at the edge of the table and ran his fingers along the edges of his notebook. In a school that was built on control, the loss of routine was what revealed the flaws. Even his teachers appeared to have changed. His ethics instructor called UAA target during a lecture before swiftly correcting herself, and the lead of the support course issued a rare public warning about securing experimental gear and not going out alone at night. After hours, Izuku dedicated more time to updating Quirk profiles, creating new flowcharts, and double-checking field contingency plans with Zuki in the General Studies building's deserted corners. He discovered Michelle pacing the hallway outside their dorms one evening. Without being asked, she stated, "They've changed the Hero Course schedule. They suddenly added a rescue simulation to their calendar. Additional teachers as well." Looking up, Izuku said, "Rescue?" "Yes." She looked at him and said, "Some sort of off-site training exercise. Do you know anything?" He paused, then said, "No," squinting, she said, "but you feel it too." He gave a nod. Naomi unfolded a folded set of schematic prints on the floor of a private room hidden above the support lab that night. These prints were not official. They were handmade and included maps of the UA training zones, emergency exits, ventilation systems, and underground tunnels that weren't on student-accessible files. As he walked in, she glanced up at him. "Are you familiar with the USJ? The unexpected joint for simulation?" "Yes," Izuku said. "They use it as a facility to model extensive disaster response." Naomi nodded. "It's rumored that this week they're testing the Hero Course. Initial years. Which is strange because children are typically not allowed inside until after the second term." Scowling, Izuku said, "What sort of test? But everything's pointing to something off script," she said, tapping the corner of one of the blueprints. "That's what I'm trying to find out. Schedule changes for the faculty. Principal Nezu requested manual overrides. Additional support units have been put on standby." The implication lingered even though she didn't say it. Something tangible. Aaron's messages became quieter, John's shadows grew thicker, and the streets of Naruhata changed color under unmarked vans and construction barricades. Later, Izuku felt the pulse of the city pounding against his ribs as he stood on the roof of the dorms with Zuki circling overhead. And UA? Still grinning superficially. "I'm still acting." He reflected on what All Might had said in the corridor. "Perfection is not something I promised. I said I would try." Izuku doubted that merely trying would be sufficient. No longer. He pulled out his notebook, turned to a new page, and scratched across the paper, writing a phrase, not a plan, not a quirk. "Don't wait if something occurs. Take action." Zuki sat on the railing behind him. "The system has been updated. Triggers for personal emergencies. At dawn, monitoring starts." Izuku gave a nod. Floodlights flickered far below in the Hero Course building, where students trained in the dark like heroes under siege, not realizing that siege was already approaching. Scene. Evening before USJ, faculty lounge sitting atop a thick stack of course evaluations. Principal Nezu stirred his tea slowly and precisely, and the only sound in the lounge was the occasional hum of the overhead lights. All Might, despite his fragile frame, stood across the room by the tall window with his arms crossed and his posture rigid. Earlier this week, All Might acknowledged, I had a difficult conversation. Nezu flicked his ear. With a pupil? You're still thinking about it today, so it must have been something. All Might answered, Midoriya, General Studies. Nezu raised his head. Oh. That name has already been mentioned. I take it that he is not in any of our hero pathways? No, replied All Might, but he desired to be. Many years ago. He questioned me about whether a hero could be someone without a quirk. What did you say to him? I told him no. Nezu squinted a little. And today? He reminded me today that I never tried to save him, All Might said, letting out a slow exhale. That I didn't think he was even worth pursuing. The ensuing silence was heavy, but not judgmental. At last, Nezu uttered, and was he wrong? No, replied All Might, he wasn't upset. Not at all. He simply gave me the impression that I was smaller than the me he had grown up admiring. Nezu put his cup down. I imagine that hurt more than anything else could. It did. All Might nodded wearily. Time is running out, he said, lowering himself into the chair across from Nezu and looking down at his hands. I must select a successor. One for all won't have to wait indefinitely. Mirio Tagada, announced Nezu. He's everything a symbol of peace should be, said All Might, nodding once more. Powerful. Nice. Motivated. I've seen him fight, and he makes it appear effortless, even joyful. Nezu cocked his head, saying, but, there is a part of me that wonders if I've been looking for the wrong qualities. All Might pause. I continue to watch Class 1A, as well as some in 1B. They're powerful. Potential. But strength isn't all I want. I'm looking for someone who knows what it's like to lend a hand without being noticed, to give up without receiving praise. And today, Midoriya showed me what that looks like, he said, leaning back with a detached expression. Nezu took a moment to answer. You don't intend to pick him, do you? No, All Might replied. He isn't a good fit. For this quirk, no, he is taking a new route. However, he helped me realize that I might be selecting a symbol that the world is already familiar with when, in fact, it might require something completely different. Nezu said quietly, is there something it's not prepared for? Exactly, said All Might. Once more, he gazed down at the hands that once carried the weight of the entire world. He claimed that Mirio embodied the best of the world in its current state, but what about someone like Midoriya? He is a true reflection of the world. Introspective, Nezu sipped his tea. Then the question isn't who can carry one for all, he stated. It's who can carry the future. Everyone sat quietly. Long shadows were cast throughout the room as the sun sank behind the UA towers. The following day the blink was the first. In the time it took Mei to blink twice and turn back to her workstation, UA's internal communication grid, which is typically a redundant, three-layered system with automatic failover, went down. She gave her screen a tap. The network diagnostics returned a static pulse and a red triangle. Link for communication. Down nodes received. 0. Affected primary location. USJ. Simultaneously, she heard a faint ticking sound coming from her wrist. The glove she had altered the previous semester made a single, quiet, sharp, and discreet buzzing sound. ID. Shinso. Alert code 6. Customer ping, she gasped. She turned on her heel and ran out of the lab without saying anything. When they almost collided, Izuku was already climbing the stairs and he grabbed the railing to prevent himself from falling backward. What took place? His eyes narrowed as he asked. Under her goggles, Mei appeared pale. The comms are out. Where? USJ. A second went by. Then, with a sharp flick of her tail, Naomi appeared from the other hallway. She claimed, I felt the grid hiccup, which wasn't typical. The blackout was that. Shinso sent a silent ping, Mei said, holding up her glove. Don't text, only the warning. Shinso had been asked to watch the Hero Course's rescue training session as part of a behavioral study, customer immersion, they'd called it, and Izuku's mind was racing, gears turning. However, there was no drill here. Is it possible to gain access to the Hero Course security feed? He inquired. I've already tried. Everything is not online. So what do we think this is? Naomi said, pacing once while her claws clicked against the tile. Error. A renegade antagonist, or worse. If this were a drill, they wouldn't use full blackout, Mei said, already opening her belt pack and assembling a cantaloupe-sized collapsible drone. Additionally, they refused to cut student observers. With his fingers hovering just above the page, Izuku glanced down at his notebook. he said, Zuki, triggering the well-known. The owl's eyes glowed dimly as it came into focus. Comms outage confirmed. The USJ site did not provide any telemetry. The faculty keylock prevents an emergency override. The situation is classified. They're locking us out on purpose. Naomi's eyes grew piercing. There's something going on, Izuku said, clenching his fists. Something negative, and we are to remain in our current location. Supposed to, said Naomi again. For a moment, nobody moved. If Shinso sent me an alert, he's in danger, Mei said, looking up from her drone with pale light reflected in her goggles. Additionally, he didn't forward it to anybody else. Slowly, Izuku released his breath. They'll claim that we're interfering. That security is being compromised. Naomi stated, they'll be right. He gave her a look. All right. With her eyes sparkling like starfields, Naomi cocked her head and said, I didn't sign up to watch people die from a safe distance. Izuku gazed at his notebook, which was pulsing softly. He recalled what he had written the previous evening. Don't wait if something occurs. Take action. He gave Mei a look. Send the drone. Silently. The signal will be obscured by Zuki. Done. He gave Naomi a look. Are you prepared? I was born ready. They shifted. Not carelessly, not loudly. Just quick. Concentrated. There was silence in the world outside the simulation, but something had broken within that silence. They also didn't intend to wait for approval before making the necessary repairs. Within minutes, Mei was spoofing dorm check-ins, rerouting comm tower ping signals, looping hallway camera footage, and typing on 4 overlapping screens to depict the 3 of them studying in various parts of campus. As he kept time, Zuki hovered above, his talons changing their angle. His gentle pulse glow turned green instead of yellow. Overriding external sensors, gate logs were cleaned. You were invisible, Mei. Mei muttered. I love when he says that, as she shoved a pack of tools into her side pouch and grabbed her goggles. Izuku had begun to take pages out of his notebook. Beside him, 2 sleek, hybrid-powered tactical motorcycles glinted into position with a rustle of light and wind. One was slate gray with a large side compartment that could accommodate a second rider or cargo, and the other was black and green. Izuku stated, they've been in the book for 2 weeks, in a quiet voice, fully tuned, fueled, and bound. Naomi looked at him sidelong. How the hell did you even fit those in there? He gave a shrug. Same way Zuki fits in your hand but takes up half a room in my book. My powers are weird. Izuku was still unable to inform his friends about Nen, until Eren informed him that he could. They moved quickly, slipping through the lower access tunnel, a maintenance path that connected the edge of the Naruhata forest with the outer limits of UA, which Mei had unlocked earlier that semester. Nevertheless, Izuku tapped his earpiece just before mounting up. John's private line, encrypted. A voice with a gravelly tone answered a moment later. You better not be doing what I think you're doing. They're under attack, John, Izuku stated. Shinso sent the silent. Then call it in. Let the pros handle it. No time, interrupted Naomi over the phone. Comms are jammed. We're the only ones with the alert. A pause occurred. Following that, Eren's out of the country. You go in without backup, you're breaking protocol and common sense. Izuku tightened his jaw. You think I care about protocol right now? John let out a breath. You don't know what's down there. If y'all get caught or killed, it's over for all of us. You're also putting my sister life at jeopardy. Izuku declared, we're not going in to fight, we're going to extract who we can, get data, and get out. We've done worse. You haven't done it without me, Lambeth or John. I'm sorry, big bro. We can't wait for you, Naomi said. Tell our little brother hello on my behalf. The line went dead after a long, acrid silence. On the black bike, Mei kicked up the stand and said, are we going or what? With a nod, Izuku said, let's burn the map. In a blur of wind and speed, the forest went by. The bikes hugged the ancient rail trails cut through the foothills of Naruhata, routes that once carried building supplies for the now sequestered UA training domes, and Zuki soared ahead like a bullet-shaped wisp, silent and invisible, pinging back topographical updates and heat scans in real time. As they rode, they didn't talk. Mei's bike pulsed with blue light, each turn smooth and calculated, guided by sensor-assisted AI woven into her riding gloves, while Naomi stood on the back of the motorcycle, her presence steady but her voice silent. Zuki added as they arrived at the cliffside overlook above the USJ dome. No civilian movement was detected, the perimeter breach was confirmed, the power grid was destabilized, 5 different villain clusters were identified, multiple pro-hero signals were active, and Aizawa and Shota were the only known signatures. Izuku braked hard, gravel and dirt kicking up beneath them, smoke curving from one quadrant, faint flashes of quirk light flickering within, the massive dome shimmering below like a downed spaceship, its usual glow sputtering with power disruptions. With narrowed eyes, Naomi got off the bike and said, "From here, we walk." Mei concealed both bikes in a projected image of moss and rocks by activating a shimmer field around them. "We may have half an hour before the first drone sweeps are brought back online," Mei said. "Before then, we must enter and exit." Izuku turned the book over. Supportive, not offensive, stored quirks flared across 3 pages. "If either of you wants to back out, I won't stop you," he said, glancing at them both. Naomi had her baton loaded already. "Told you when we started this. If I die building something that matters," Mei said, pulling her goggles down over her eyes. Izuku put the book away. "Let's move. Not all revolutions begin with a speech. They begin with a book, a bike, and the companions you ride with. Anonymous." The smell of rust and coolant filled the hallway. Izuku moved forward stealthily, notebook held to his chest, one finger on an active page, Mei and Naomi at his sides in practiced silence, every step deliberate, every breath controlled. Zuki moved forward stealthily, scanning the tunnel as they approached the side entry conduit that had once been used for staff equipment, now shattered wide open, half-scorched and obviously forced. Zuki, quiet communications, 3 lifeforms, motion detected, heat signatures indicating low-tier quirk use, and active audio interception. They froze behind a bend in the pipe as Izuku raised a fist. Zuki went on. "We're supposed to watch, man, I'm telling you." A voice crackled, "Don't get involved." "Yes. And what happens if another hero appears? This isn't going to kill me?" "Not important. We stall them if it's not All Might," Kurogiri said. Period. Making a face, Naomi said, "Idiots. Armed?" Mei muttered. "Light gear," Zuki said, "one with gloves that are reinforced. One has low output, which is a flame quirk. A signal rig is being carried by the third." "We hit them fast," Izuku said, his breath slowing. "If we can, keep quiet. However, we stop that signal guy no matter what." Finally, Naomi smiled and unhooked her baton. Like lightning, they turned the corner. Izuku charged forward next, using a breath and a sharp pull to activate the transformation quirk in his book, and Naomi arrived before the first villain could finish a sentence. Her baton cracked against his ribs, dropping him into a gasping heap. The pages were glistening and melting. Still floating at his side, his book melted into a mass of amber sap that writhed in the air like a puppet on strings, reaching out toward the second villain. The flame-quirked man whirled, his eyes widening. What the he? The sap splashed against his legs and chest and became stuck, hardening in midair, and the more he struggled, the tighter it pulled until he crashed into the wall with a panicked shout, limbs trapped in place. Before the third villain could point the comm at his mouth, Mei jumped over a low pipe and tackled him, signal rig already in hand. He bit down, though. An emergency call-out and a tiny clicker attached to the tooth. "It's too late. Zuki. Kurogiri has been informed. Transmission was pinged. Encryption was found." "Fuck it." He had a trigger in his mouth. Mei snarled as she threw the man's rig to the ground and stomped on it. The sap crawled up the man's side, hardened again when Izuku waved a hand, and he gagged, immobile, his eyes wide with fear. "They're just goons," Naomi said, standing over the person she knocked out and idly taking his pulse, sloppy and afraid. Izuku whispered, his gaze still focused on his book's sticky, altered form, which hovered next to him, its tendrils slowly retraction back into the basic shape of a closed book. "We were never going to stay hidden forever," he said. He ran his hand over the binding. The pages reformed as though nothing had happened, curling and solidifying once more. Naomi gazed at it. "Is that something new? First time I've transformed the book itself," he said. "Didn't know it would look like that." "Tagging them for later pickup," Mei said, kneeling next to the unconscious signal guy and pressing a beacon on Zuki's underwing. "Zuki will let a UA know. After we're clear, scrub the drone." Zuki. Verified. Marked the hidden location. Prepared the remote notice for when the mission window closes. Stretching a little, Naomi said, "Well, whoever's in there knows we're here now. What a waste of sneaking in." A faint boom echoed in the distance, something in the USJ simulation detonating, and Izuku let out a breath and turned toward the breach path ahead. "We weren't made to slip in anyway," he explained. We're here to pull people out. When the fight finds you, you have no say in the matter. When it does, only what you do. Anonymous. Shinso was spit out like chewed gum by the warp. Grit scraped his uniform as he landed in a controlled roll, but he barely managed to stay upright. He realized this was not the observation deck as soon as his boots touched the charred ground. Above him, gray light filtered through a broken simulation dome, and he was surrounded by artificial rubble, including broken glass, cracked pavement, and a half-collapsed arch marked, USJ Sector D, Ruins Rescue. Nearby smoke curled. Damage was simulated, heat was real. He took a deep breath, adjusted his gloves, and remained calm. Okay, Shinso murmured, looking around. A mist man just teleported you into a war zone. It's still superior to history class. The air crackled with a faint buzz. An unidentified student moved. A disembodied voice said, "Go ahead and observe." It was smooth and artificial. Then there was quiet. Just a body thrown into the fire, with no special instructions or reference to his name. Thus, I am not yet significant to them. Excellent. Let them believe that. Shinso knelt by a broken wall, flipped the internal comm switch, and tapped the tiny throat-mounted voice amp that May had adjusted for him. There was no signal. Numbers. Nevertheless, he had issued the silent alert prior to being carried away by the warp. He had to have faith that Izuku understood. 2 blocks away, a scream shattered the atmosphere. Young woman. Shinso's legs moved before he could think. He zigzagged through debris until he spotted her, Yumi, a Class 1C student he vaguely recognized from lunch. Her arm was pinned beneath a concrete slab, blood trickling from a cut along her forehead. Above her, 2 villains stood. The other wore a gas mask and fingerless gloves that sparked with tiny arcs of electricity, and the tall, hunched one had a metal pipe slung over his shoulder and jagged teeth. The spark-gloved one sneered, "Just checking IDs, don't worry, darling. Somehow, you'll be helpful." Shinso halted behind a van that was partially buried. He made no hesitation. "Hey," he said in a measured, calm voice. The 2 villains faced him. His quirk came on immediately. "How about taking a nap?" The villain in the spark gloves blinked, and his body fell in a heap like a puppet with sliced strings. Incredulous, the other one lifted his pipe. "Huh? Too slow," said Shinso, and hurled a metal pipe from the van through the air, cracking it across the villain's arm before he charged forward and gave him a knee to the gut as the man grunted in agony. The pipe clattered to the ground, but Shinso caught it in mid-fall and gave the man 2 jabs in the ribs before sweeping his leg. With a groan, the villain struck the ground forcefully. Over him, Shinso stood, breathing steadily but forcefully. "You picked the wrong guest. You good?" he asked, turning back to Yumi. "You're not even in the hero course," she said, gazing at him with wide eyes. Shinso, who was kneeling next to the slab, said, "Yeah, let's change that." Yumi gasped and wrenched her arm free as the slab slammed back down as he braced and lifted. She grabbed her shoulder and said, "I can run, I'll find cover." "Remain hidden," Shinso said, "because they are not pursuing you. They're holding out for something more significant." He glanced at the villains who were unconscious. Izuku had better be on his way because one of them most likely called already. No equipment, not a backup, no safety net. Only him and his peculiarity. He was not afraid. No longer. Now he was in the flames. Better yet, burn brighter. Being confident does not mean entering a room with the belief that you are superior to everyone else. Knowing that you don't have to compare is what it is. Unknown. The USJ Dome's emergency exits were located in a side corridor that appeared to have been torn apart by the gods. Steel beams bent like ribbon. The central atrium where the class had arrived that morning was spider-webbed with cracks. The simulation walls fell apart in pieces, exposing malfunctioning circuits behind fake facades, and fire suppression foam pooled beneath flickering emergency lights. As they entered the open, May inhaled sharply, "Oh my God." There were dozens of students in the disaster areas, most not from the hero course, some hurt, others huddled in close quarters or trapped behind debris, desperately hiding. Looking through her visor at the nearest group, Naomi muttered, "General Studies, the ones who volunteered or sent to watch the hero course. There's no way the villains just ignored them." "No," said Izuku somberly, "they were forgotten, on purpose." For a moment, the 3 of them stood in the open, absorbing it. Then the plan came to be, initially unsaid. Izuku opened his book and said, "We divide it up. Naomi, take the northwest quadrant. There appears to be structural collapse and flooding. Pay attention to pupils who lack defensive tendencies or are immobile. Naomi nodded and started to move. Copy. I'll lead them to the exit of the control ramp. He turned to face her and said, May, start in the southeast. Electrical interference is present, most likely due to Quirk burnout or faulty wiring. The only person who can neutralize it is you. All right, May said, pulling her gloves tighter. I'll also leave a trace on the villain's communications if I discover any signal nodes that are still operational. Izuku glanced back toward the main training area, where he could just make out the silhouettes of Class 1A students under siege from a barrage of well-coordinated villain attacks. Aizawa's movements were also marked by flashes of shadow and scarf, far away but still engaged in combat. He gripped the book tighter. I'll choose the middle route. Hero pupils come last, even later teachers. Naomi hesitated. Are you certain? Izuku stated that they have training, while the general students do not. They will be the ones left behind. May. Tech neutralization and communication scramble. Izuku. Student engagement and suppression support. Naomi. Evac and triage. Zuki. Priority tags set, and the coordinated flight path was started. Above them, the owl AI's wings flailed in the light as he pulsed softly. Reaching out, Naomi briefly grabbed Izuku's shoulder and said, Don't die. If you do, May said with a quick smile, I'm raiding your book and selling the tech. They took different routes, turned, and disappeared into the smoke. Izuku took a step forward. Gravity pulse, a low-grade emitter that allowed him to temporarily lighten or anchor physical weight, was a stored quirk that he activated. The air shimmered around his feet, and he felt his balance shift with each step, ready to catch falling debris or lift someone pinned beneath it. He didn't flee, he made deliberate movements. Beside him, his notebook blinked like a heartbeat. He discovered the first student partially buried beneath both real steel and fake asphalt. His left leg was pinned at a terrible angle under twisted piping, and the real problem was a boy in general studies, in his mid-teens, trembling, obviously in shock, with a shallow cut leaking down the side of his neck. Izuku knelt next to him and pressed his hand lightly against the rubble. Don't move, he said quietly, I've got you. The boy gasped as he turned on the gravity pulse, causing the pipe to rise like a balloon. In order to prevent the bone from grinding during evacuation, Izuku slid a page from his book and wrapped it around the boy's shin. As soon as it touched the boy's shin, a glowing seal shimmered. Support stabilization technique. It wouldn't heal him. Zuki hovered above, looking around. Student tags. Non-hero 5 more signals were found, one of which was critical. With a nod, Izuku said, Show me. He moved between fallen walls and ruined platforms like a ghost for the next 10 minutes, finding, lifting, reinforcing, and calming. His book moved fluidly between quirks. A sheet of hardened light to carry 3 students across a collapsed bridge, a quick burst of air pressure to crack open jammed panels, and a soft glow here to deflect falling rock. In the meantime, the sound of villain movement increased. Better organized. Izuku heard it, footsteps, mocking laughter, the hum of charging quirks, but he continued. He was unable to. It was not yet a battle, it was triage. On a cleared hallway, he placed one of May's tag beacons, which was glowing blue and served as a signal to evac points for any students who had recovered. He then muttered something under his breath, You won't leave them behind. Heroes dash into peril. But fairness? Izuku Midoriya once said, Justice begins by saving those no one else sees. Naomi. Flood zone in the northwest quadrant. The water was rapidly rising. With bioenergy pulsing faintly beneath her boots and gloves, Naomi bounded through it, her breathing steady, but now she was moving instinctively, searching twisted concrete, collapsed scaffolds, and broken simulation sets. Zuki. Life form right under the rubble, vital signs. She halted and ripped a panel off. There lay a student, soaked and motionless. His skin had turned gray-blue. He was probably 15 years old and had shallow breath, if any. A gentle pulse of Naomi's bioenergy surged through the circuit as she dropped to her knees and moved quickly, without hesitation, pressing one palm to his sternum and gently wrapping her tail around his wrist to make the connection. Don't you dare, she said. You don't get to die in a school exercise gone wrong. She had a glowing tail. The energy was transferred. Then, sputter. He let out a deep gasp, opened his eyes, and started coughing up water. Naomi helped him sit up, but she didn't smile. You'll live. Are you a rescue hero or? He asked, blinking at her. Before she could reply, 3 students, 2 from 1A and 1 from General Studies, came around the corner, all with burns and bruises, and they skidded to a stop when they saw Naomi, mask up, armor glinting. Remain motionless. Who the hell are you? Yelled one of the 1A boys. With a tight tactical suit, bioconductive veins flickering along her gloves, and a white hood hanging off one shoulder like a dare, Naomi slowly grew to her full height, placing herself between the others and the rescued student. I'm not your enemy, she replied. If I were, that kid would be dead. You're not a student, the General Studies said, raising her hand as if to activate a quirk. You're not a hero. What are you, then? Naomi met her gaze. I'm what shows up when heroes don't. They paused. One whispered, you're a vigilante. Naomi gave a single nod. And now, I am therefore your best opportunity. Gritting his teeth, the 1A boy said, you're breaking the law. So are the people trying to kill you? She asked as she began to pass them. Southeast quadrant of May. Power zone. The smell of fried circuitry and ozone filled the hallway. A drone, an old model rebuilt with modern optics, was dropped from May's belt and sent crawling through the next room as she ducked a sparking conduit and slid behind a support pillar. It showed a villain with a railgun arm laughing and firing bolts overhead to make the 6 students huddle behind a storage crate flinch. After completing a capacitor upgrade last week, May opened her disruptor rifle and screwed it on. Let's field test this sucker. She emerged from hiding, took aim, and fired. ZWAP. The whole railgun shorted. The villain yelled and fell, feedback sizzling his arm. As if she had just landed from space, the students gazed at her. None of them could identify her, or what she was, because she was wearing a full breather mask that muffled her voice, a white and blue field suit with visible plating, and reinforced impact goggles. One of them, a dark braided girl in Class 1A, stood up warily. Who are you? Wait. Without responding, May turned and began zip-tying the villain to a pipe. Are the teachers with you? Someone else inquired. Nope. A protective shell shimmered in the air between them as the braided girl activated her quirk. Then back up. We have no idea who you are. May stopped and glanced behind her. You're correct, you don't. The spider drone flashed blue and projected a safe route to Zuki's evac zone as she pressed a button on her forearm display. She nodded at the villain and remarked, but you'd already be bleeding if I was with them. With hesitation, the 1A girl turned to face her and said, so why help us? May twisted her mouth behind her mask, because someone should. Zuki. Book Kids zone is compromised, signals are growing, central pressure is rising, and the Naomi and May quadrants are both clear. In her earpiece, Naomi tapped, tell him I'm on the way. According to May, tell him not to do anything stupid till we get there. She also loaded a new capacitor into her rifle. Zuki gave a low beep. The vigilante unit has returned to the central path. In a world that only trusts heroes or villains, be something else. Unknown. The fictitious city was burning. The sky was lit by the sharp crack of a quirk every few seconds, sirens screamed in loops, and columns of smoke curled from simulated buildings, some real, some not. Another villain shouted across the street as Izuku ducked low and ran between 2 shattered storefronts, his notebook glowing at his side, a bolt of electricity scorching the wall behind him, just missing his shoulder. He's on his way to the square. Stop him. Izuku leapt, rolled, and snapped his fingers in midair, and as more blasts pursued his heels, a kinetic quirk from his book flared and redirected his landing, sending him slingshotting over a wrecked car. High overhead, cloaked and silent, Zuki fed him a constant flow of information. Zuki. 2 mutants, 7 pursuing villains, 5 verified emitter types, and 1 obstructing the southern alley. There are 5 civilians in the sector, down from 11. The majority are safe, with 2 being escorted by Naomi and 1 pursuing May's drone. Heat rippled from scorched walls, and the buildings moaned with simulated damage as Izuku ducked into a narrow alley, breathing hard but focused. He had no intention of winning, he was putting things off. Establishing himself as the target, buying Zuki time to lead the remaining General Studies children to safety, and diverting the enemy's attention from those who were unable to defend themselves. A 4-armed splicer, one of the villains, jumped from the roof above him. Izuku responded immediately. The pages of his notebook glowed, and stretched out like chains of hardened ink, and he slid to a stop, whirled, and opened it. They were whipped into the air by him. The splicer was caught in mid-fall by 2 tendrils, which caused him to collide with a building's side. Izuku struck him in the chest with a page wrapped in kinetic reflection after another leapt from the left, energy quirk already flaring, and the blast struck the villain and bounced backward, slamming him into his own teammate. Zuki. The evacuation route is safe, The civilian count is finished, and every general education student in your sector is present. Izuku's gaze grew strained. Good. 5 villains were snarling and closing in on him when he skidded to a stop in the center of the plaza. He turned the next page. Vinebound expansion is a transformation quirk. Ink transformed into living tendrils of semi-organic paper that snapped outward like vines, and the book changed in midair, the pages becoming soft, sticky, then wild. A net of writhing bindings suddenly erupted throughout the courtyard. It was too late for the villains to avoid it. Izuku twisted his fingers, and the vines locked in place, pinning all 5 of them like insects under glass, one by the ankles, one by the arms, and a third slamming to the ground as the pages hardened around him like sap that dries quickly. He squatted low, his ears listening for movement, and he breathed heavily. Zuki. Nomu class threat engage. Pro hero backup. None. New alert. Instructor Shota Aizawa. Life signs rapidly dropping. Location. East Arena Quadrant. Once, Izuku's heart slammed. He made no hesitation. Not even for a moment. Determine the flight path. Maximum speed. Verified. Flight configuration is the book mode. The notebook exploded open once more, the pages layering, folding, and stiffening into a wide slab of energy-bound, hardened script that resembled a surfboard. Izuku leapt. With both feet, he landed on the flying book and sped across the skyline, his cloak snapping behind him and the wind tearing past his face. Zuki hovered just ahead of him, looking for Aizawa. 30 meters. Nomu above the target, critical blood loss, slowing motion. Izuku's eyes narrowed. Give me height. I'm going to take the shot. He took the book off the shelf. He whirled the notebook he was holding in midair, and triggered a complete metamorphosis. With a surge of weight and mass, the book bound its own pages together, transforming into a massive tome, a single, dense, gray chunk of concrete. He threw it like a meteor down. The Nomu didn't anticipate it. Crack. The creature was knocked off Aizawa and buried halfway into the concrete floor when the concrete book struck its head. With one arm dragging and barely conscious, Aizawa rolled to the side. A few seconds later, Izuku sprinted toward him and hit the ground, his boots skidding across the pavement. He dropped to his knees next to the hero who was bleeding. Go ahead, Eraser, remain with me. The eyes of Aizawa opened. You, book kid? Beneath his mask, Izuku gave a small smile. Guess I'm pretty popular around here, huh? Sometimes being a hero means staying alive long enough to throw the book at them. Izuku Midoriya. As it attempted to strike Izuku, the Nomu was adjusting. The concrete book he had slammed into its skull had already been compensated for by its regeneration, and his emitter quirks barely slowed it down. His transformation quirks on his book gave him armor, but not enough to tank its raw strength or its speeds, and worse, he couldn't keep dodging forever. It now lunged low, tracking Izuku's hip motion instead of his shoulders. Behind him, Aizawa lay bleeding, and the man's breath sounded like sandpaper. Izuku was unable to win, but he was also unable to depart. Panting, he opened his book again. Perhaps if I. On the Nomu's flank, a blur of lavender bioenergy appeared. Her tail glowed, her gauntlets surged, and her whole body radiated bioelectric energy charge as Naomi dropped in, boots skidding on broken tile. She said, I said I'd be back, without glancing at him. Could have used you 30 seconds ago, Izuku said, glancing to his left. Where's Mei? One of Mei's anti-tech rounds from the railgun rang out, bouncing through the air before exploding in a controlled EMP burst across one of the Nomu's limbs, causing the Nomu to twitch and growl in frustration. Though one of her gauntlets sparked and her armor was cracked, Mei's stance remained unwavering as she emerged from the smoke, saying, didn't want to upstage you. In the wreckage, the 3 vigilantes stood shoulder to shoulder. The mist followed. With one hand dragging across a rotting railing beneath his fingers, Tamura Shigaraki emerged from behind Kurogiri, which had formed in a slow spiral of violet fog across the plaza. When he saw Izuku, he stopped. According to Shigaraki, that's him, or the book kid. Izuku tensed. Didn't recognize him at first, Kurogiri continued, but yes. I've seen that one online. Feeds underground. Posts from the community. Footage that has been redacted. The one about which Sensei forewarned us. Yeah, Shigaraki said, scratching his neck, advised against pursuing him. Izuku's lips were parched. Why? Because, Kurogiri answered, the other Nen user is typically close by. Whoever has the long coat. We have also seen him. Izuku's thoughts whirled. Eren. They are aware. They are aware of Eren and Nen. Shigaraki gave a shrug, but I don't see him now. When he lifted his hand, 3 smaller Nomu emerged from the mist and landed hard around them, their limbs twitching and their jaws snarling. Let's make sure this one doesn't leave. Students in their hero costumes, with the exception of one dressed in school clothes, hurried in from the east side, their eyes wide as they took in the scene. A wall of ice was raised by Shoto Todoroki between the incoming Nomu and Izuku's team. What on earth are they? His eyes narrowed at the vigilantes as he asked. Bakugo cracked his neck and said, "Dunno, but they're not the villains." Kirishima pulled and adjusted his shoulder and remarked, "Look at their gear," saying, "Definitely not UA." "They've been circling the forums for months," Shinso said calmly, referring to them as vigilantes. He played it as if he was assembling the puzzle without blinking or turning to face Izuku. From behind her visor, Mei gave him the smallest nod of approval. Weak and covered in blood, Aizawa struggled to his feet on one arm as he stirred at the bottom of the debris. "Run, you idiots, you're all just kids," he growled. "That thing's not." However, it was too late. The air exploded with motion as all sides clashed as the Nomu roared. At USJ, the actual conflict started. They were certainly not normal, but he had no idea who the hell they were. The man with the glowing book and the long coat moved like a man accustomed to chaos. The tail girl's punches cracked like impact grenades, and she was too fast. The third one dropped suppression technology like she had constructed the battlefield herself, complete with goggles, equipment, and a voice mask. It was disliked by Bakugo. It was really not to his liking. Because he was aware that the man appeared familiar, particularly from that damn book. But he was awakened by the Nomu's grunting. He rushed forward as soon as the Nomu charged. Not to keep them safe. Merely to make room. "Move." He launched into the closest of the smaller Nomu, catching it full body with a double blast that sent it hurtling through a half-standing wall, the ground cratering beneath his palms. He landed hard and whirled around to confront the next danger. Behind him, or at least attempting to, were that one general education student and the other class 1A student in formation. Todoroki covered the back, Kirishima flanked left, and Shinso was dragging his unconscious teacher out of harm's way like a shadow. Bakugo, however, was unable to stop observing them. The vigilantes. No names were used. Not a word. Only motions, quick reactions, and changes in formation. Movement at the military level. He was weaving in and out of the Nomu's range, activating one quirk after another, the one with the book. Book Kid, as that mist freak had called him. Types of emitters. Types of transformation. There was some hybrid trash that Bakugo was unable to recognize. The child was clever, though, and pushed opponents toward the girl with the tail with forceful flashbangs before sweeping their legs and slamming them to the ground. It was functioning, but not quickly enough. Bakugo blasted the air beneath the second Nomu's feet as it launched toward it, knocking it off balance. "Focus the big ones. Kill the head, the rest follow." The tail girl yelled back, "You're not in charge," without turning to face him. Bakugo lost his temper. "I will be if you get smoked, Stripes." Bakugo noticed that they looked at each other for a half-second. Her visor twitched behind her, the faint flicker of identification. She was familiar with him, but remained silent. Excellent. Because he didn't want an explanation at the moment, he was looking for answers. As he turned, he saw Todoroki freeze the ground around the largest Nomu's legs, only to have the beast roar and shatter it before charging once more. Just before the Nomu's claws hit, Book Kid, the book wielder, flipped backward, conjured up a wall of energy script like a shield, and slid behind it. It was pursuing him. Bakugo's mind made a connection. "They're after the kid with the book," he whispered to himself. "Why him?" Then, through the confusion, he heard Kurogiri's voice. "Our orders were to avoid him unless the Nen user was present. Sensei didn't want interference." "Nen? What on earth is Nen?" With fire trailing from his gauntlets, Bakugo shot upward, aiming directly at the Nomu's back. He knew this even though he didn't understand what was going on. The villains wanted to kill this Book Kid, whoever he was. Bakugo wasn't going to let that happen without knowing why. His palms illuminated the entire battlefield as he fell like a thunderbolt from the sky. "Die, you freak." The zone was rocked by the explosion. "You don't have to like someone to fight for them. You just have to know what's at stake." Katsuki Bakugo. From Mei's perspective, Mei had 5 seconds to fix a machine. She was able to construct 1 in 30. However, she was unable to give Izuku another life. Not down there with him. He was dodging more slowly now, his book glowing wildly as each page missed the lead Nomu with a solid hit. His transformational quirks were insufficient protection. Not enough damage was being done by his emitters. He was having trouble breathing, and a near-miss claw swipe had ripped open the edge of his coat. With her rifle pressed to her chest and her eyes fixed on him through a cracked lens, Mei squatted on a shattered platform above the battlefield. She was accustomed to chaos under control. Battle is like math. That wasn't this. It was a combat zone. Her best friend is the direct target of a meat grinder the size of Nomu. Come on, Izu, move left, not right, left. He didn't. He was cut. He remained motionless for a moment after his shoulder collided with the wall. She felt panic pierce her ribs. No, not at all, not right now. Her arm bracer's emergency panel flipped open as she fell flat against the ledge. She had been putting this off for something much more ridiculous, but now was the moment. A recipe. She had created a synthetic molecular cocktail using some scavenged pro-hero chemical equipment and Mina Ishido's acid output as a model. It was too unstable for her to have built herself. Too risky. It required instantaneous synthesis, real-time balancing, and a chemical producer with a field rating. Like Yayorozu Momo. Perfect, mumbled Mei. 2 girls with goo powers. One idea too explosive to keep to myself. Her fingers snapped. Her AI dragon unfurled with a low whir, rising into the air like a glassy sensor face and a metallic serpent with turbine wings, as a capsule on her back hissed open. Zilla, she whispered, go. Target students on upper support tier. Priority. Momo Yayorozu and Mina Ishido. Code phrase. Bleeding Sunburst Protocol. Zilla. Indeed. I'm requesting the synthesis team. Uploading the specifications. Take off now. Through smoke and rubble, the dragon flew in the direction of the far-off stairway where she had previously witnessed some students flee. The large Nomu roared once more below, charging back toward Izuku, who had just managed to get to his feet. Mei pressed her fingers into her hand. If Zilla failed to show up. If they declined. Should this not work? No. No more ifs. She put her broken goggles back on, reloaded the EMP cartridge, and spoke to herself in a shield-like whisper. I don't need to be the strongest, just the one who builds the way out. When nothing's left to throw, you build something bigger, and you throw that instead. Mei to herself. Kirishima's point of view. One of the smaller Nomu crashed through a broken billboard after Kirishima slammed his forearm into its jaw. He roared, wide-eyed and rock-skinned, back off. He was standing despite the fact that every part of his body ached from impact after impact. Neither Nomu bled. They trembled, as if machines were incapable of fully comprehending pain. Another Nomu was encased from knee to knee in a wall of ice that surged upward beside him. Todoroki once more. It thrashed and clawed but did not break out. For the time being. Wiping his forehead, Kirishima glanced around. Shinso continued to battle other evildoers who were defending their sensei. Overhead, Bakugo was going nuclear. However, his gaze kept straying to them, the trio of vigilantes. One of the larger Nomu had just been hit by a confusing pulse shot from the smaller female with the tech rifle and broken goggles, causing it to snarl and reel. The man with the book fought as if he had studied every possible quirk. In a 20-second exchange, Kirishima saw him use fire, then lightning, and finally a gravity field of some sort to anchor his legs to the ground. The one with the tail was efficient, vicious, and occasionally didn't think twice about putting herself in the way of oncoming attacks. Kirishima muttered out loud, who are these people? They were not bad guys. That much was clear. They weren't heroes, though. Nevertheless, he sensed it. Their motivations for fighting were sound. And that was sufficient in such a war. The smaller Nomu roared out of the ice, but before it could get away completely, Todoroki strengthened the layer of ice, locking its legs and torso once more. Flatly, they're wearing down, Todoroki stated, if we press. Everything changed at that point. Shigaraki reached up and put his hand on Nomu's iced shoulder. Kirishima noticed it right away. He yelled, no, and started to move. He's going to. The decay spread like water and ink. The ice broke. The flesh broke and started to fall apart. However, before it was done, ZZZT, boom, the side of Shigaraki's neck was struck by a single, fast-moving stun shot. He twitched from the pulse and staggered back. On a damaged overpass, the gunman stood by himself. The vigilante in a tech suit, the rifle-wielding one. Slowly, Mei, who Kirishima still didn't recognize, dropped her weapon. That's for shooting at my prototypes, creep, she sub-vocalized. However, that instance, that small, bright moment, captured the Nomu's attention, each and every one. Like blood reprogrammed animals, they all three turned. They stared at her. She's too far away to get to her in time. She remained motionless, did not run. I just reloaded. The book kid then intervened to keep her from encountering the largest Nomu. Kirishima hardly noticed. A soft flash of light, a blur of movement, and then crunch. Still unknown to them, Izuku took the full force of a Nomu charge. Mei was completely protected as his body crashed into her. He used a transformation quirk to try to absorb the impact, but it was insufficient as his book broke open in midair. He struck the floor with force, remained motionless. Kirishima felt her chest tighten. Todoroki swore next to him. Bakugo yelled something that was too far away to hear. However, Kirishima? He tightened his stance, gritted his teeth, and charged the nearest Nomu once more. He had no idea who the man was. However, anyone who engaged in such combat was family at the time. You don't need to know someone's name to stand with them. Just where they stand when it counts. Unanimous. Shinso's point of view, he was uncertain if it would be effective on him. He had to try, though. After the book kid was leveled for using the rifle to save the girl, Shigaraki was momentarily unguarded, off balance, enraged, and vulnerable. In that instant, Shinso yelled, "Hey! What time of loser are you letting your Nomu do all the hard work?" Shigaraki jerked his head in the direction of the voice. "What?" His body froze. Shinso took a slow step forward and spoke in a level voice. "Disintegrate the Nomus quickly." Shigaraki twitched his fingers. Before the nearest Nomu could even snarl, 5 rotting fingers were pressing against its back. The object turned to ash. Just one step. One more. Confused, the second Nomu turned. The third did the same. Break. Dust. Todoroki muttered, "Holy crap," next to him. "He's doing it." "Not for long," mumbled Shinso. A moment later, Kurogiri's mist burst next to Shigaraki, sweeping over his head like a thunderous and static wave. The link broke due to the warping. Shigaraki staggered, spitting out of his mouth and blinking rapidly. "You little," his hand shook as if he was unaware of what it had just done. Then his crimson eyes met Shinso's. "You're dead." Naomi's point of view, Izuku was still asleep. Naomi hunched over him, pressing 2 fingers to his chest while her hands glowed dimly with bioenergy. A whisper, "Come on, nerd," she said. "You survived worse. You got hit by Mei's prototypes and kept walking. Don't drop on me now." He breathed shallowly. His nervous system was twitching as a result of blunt force trauma and quirk overload. Beside him, his book was open and dark. She pushed past her limit and threw more energy into him. She was already so tired that her tail was flickering. She whispered, "Stay awake for her, stay awake for us." Zuki landed beside Izuku. As Zuki started scanning Izuku and fastening rods to him, he said, "Mom 1.0 wouldn't forgive you if you died. And neither will I." Point of view made 10 minutes ago. Zilla had come back, her hull dented, her AI dragon wings sputtering, but she had delivered. The carbon stabilizer made by Momo. Raw acid glands from Ashido, chemically sealed and created on the spot. With tears in her eyes, Mei squatted behind a broken pillar, pulling cords, twisting tubes, and checking thermals. Behind her, the sound of the battle diminished. The pressurized metal casing hissed. Within a glass cartridge, liquid swirled. She put the stabilizer in. There was a pink-orange volatility about the whole thing. Her gloves trembled. "One shot," she said in a whisper, "better than perfect." She looked up after putting the acid capsule into her new launcher. The Nomu. The large one. Breathing still, standing. The others were simply lost by Shigaraki. He was even more dangerous because he appeared to be a cornered dog. He spit blood and growled, "You freaks think you've done something? You think killing 3 rejects is going to stop him?" His eyes twitched with restraint as he turned to face the large Nomu, who was still standing close to where he had launched Izuku. "Kill them all." Then there was a tremor. The pressure sounded like thunder. "Wind." A voice. "Not today." All Might landed in a wall of broken pavement and gold light between them and the Nomu as the air split. Naomi's mouth fell open. Shinso gave a blink. With a single exhale, Mei's hands gripped her launcher more tightly. All Might turned away from them. All he looked at was the Nomu, and grinned. "A symbol doesn't arrive when you're ready. It arrives when you're about to break." Hitoshi Shinso. Izuku was gasping for air. Zuki started to flutter around Naomi and Izuku, saying, "No, no, no, your heart rate is irregular. Neural spikes erratic. This isn't part of the plan." Naomi pushed her palm and tail against his chest, forcing another pulse into him while her bioenergy flickered weakly. The battle trembling the ground behind her was not as loud as her heartbeat. "You're not dying here," she said in a low voice. "I won't let you." He didn't answer. Beside them, his book flickered dimly, the pages fluttering as if struggling to stay open. This time the Nomu roared closer. Mei squatted next to her, speaking in a tight but low voice, yelling Izuku's name repeatedly. Before Mei could finish saying, "We need to move. He's not getting up anytime soon. I'll carry him," Naomi grabbed her. "Zuki, the biometrics of All Might are unstable. 23% less was produced. Strain on the upper body. Collapse risk is increasing. 2 minutes and 40 seconds is the estimated time to failure." The alert was overridden by a second ping. Message received. From John. Level of encryption. Reliable message. 5 minutes are up. A paramedic in disguise. South Gate. On the grill is a red cross. Bring Lambeth along. Reach the extraction point. Mei and Naomi looked at each other. "Zuki, show us the fastest covered route." "The route has been uploaded. 340 meters is the exit path. 3 potential lines of sight for the enemy. 47% fog density. Now go ahead." Izuku's lifeless body was moved over Naomi's shoulder. Even though his head lolled and blood spattered her armor, he was still breathing, albeit faintly. Mei held her launcher in place. "If that thing follows us." According to Naomi, "We slow it down, no matter what." As All Might struck the Nomu's torso, sending shockwaves through the arena, the creature let out a frustrated shriek. The symbol of peace, however, faltered, for a moment only. All Might slid backward, one knee striking the floor as the Nomu delivered a counterblow. He made a sound that was hardly human, a combination of pain, strain, and anger. Zuki All might be unable to exert pressure. The target is exposed. 3.7 seconds is the window. "Got it," mumbled Mei. Bracing her launcher, she dropped to one knee and squeezed the trigger. The air hissed with the acid shot. The head was not hit. However, it struck the knee. The leg melted and buckled, causing the Nomu to stumble and scream in a guttural, choked sound. With all of his remaining strength, All Might charged forward. Smash! The earth cracked. The Nomu fell apart. The sky became motionless. Mei turned around. Now. They took off running. Like ghosts, they moved through dust and shattered walls, hiding behind shattered stairwells and bits of simulation debris. Zuki swooped forward, looking around. Clear enemy line of sight. No chase. 90-meter south gate. An ambulance van is on its way. The gate opened just enough to reveal an ancient, beaten medical van at the base of the edge of the dome. John opened the back doors. "Load and shut. We've got 3 minutes max before they figure out we're not with dispatch," John cried out. Calm and appreciative, Lambeth sat behind the wheel. He kept his gaze fixed on the perimeter. With Izuku still unconscious in her arms, Naomi climbed in first. Mei trailed behind, goggles cracked and foggy, rifle slung over her back. They hid inside the van's shadows. Shinso stood in the shadow of a shattered archway high above them. He waited for the doors to close, until the van disappeared without a trace. The student with several hands jogged past him in Class 1A. "You see where those vigilantes went?" Shinso gave a headshake. "No idea. And they were gone in an instant. Some exits aren't escapes, they're survival in motion." Naomi. The fighting had cleared, but not the smoke. The ice from Shoto Todoroki's previous attack was still hissing where it met the fire-blackened stone as he stood with his back to a charred wall. All around them, steam rose. A spooky mist illuminated only by the silent hum of hovering stretchers and the flashing red strobes of emergency personnel. With a close-knit circle of medics surrounding him, All Might was down. Aizawa had lost consciousness. Shinso stood just outside the cordon, silent. The others, the vigilantes, have left. Shoto tried to calm his breathing and clenched his fists. His ribs ached. His leg trembled. That was something he detested. 3 masked figures had appeared out of nowhere. Not bad guys. Not heroes. Simply put, it works. The one with the notebook, he recalled. His movements. How they had slowed the Nomu. How naturally the girl with the tail jumped into the fight. And the technical one, she was exact and calculating. They fought for more than just survival, they battled for victory. A voice said, "Shoto, are you okay?" He turned to see Momo, standing despite his bruises, following Ashido as they made their way to the temporary command post where Principal Nezu was organizing the responders. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Fine." He didn't say anything, but he stepped closer enough to hear them. "And then this mechanical dragon thing swoops down," Ashido said, "and it's talking. Like, with a voice, and it's asking me and Momo for chemical accelerants and resin stabilizers." Nezu's ears pricked up. "And you complied?" Momo had a sheepish expression. "I didn't recognize the voice, but it knew our names and asked specifically for an acid-compatible casing and 2 compounds from my utility belt. It sounded urgent." With a calm yet inquisitive tone, Nezu questioned, "And it took those materials?" Ashido gave a nod. "Yeah. Just zipped away with them. Right before the Nomu charged again." Nezu tapped his clipboard with his paw. "Fascinating." Shoto scowled. They weren't improvising, then. They had intelligence. A strategy. They'd even told their AI who to approach. He glanced back over the field of rubble. One of the vigilantes had thrown themselves in front of the Nomu to defend another the last time he saw them. They were not pretending to be heroes. They were behaving completely differently. His face was unreadable as he gazed at the horizon where the smoke turned to stars. "Who the hell are you? The masks we wear say less about what we hide and more about what we're preparing to become." Nezu, Field Observations. New red lines appeared just beneath the corner of his jaw as Tamura Shigaraki scratched furiously at his neck. He murmured, "I told you it wasn't my fault," as he paced slowly in circles and ran his fingertips along the walls. Plaster flakes crumbled under his fingers. They were supposed to be normal students. And that book brat wasn't even supposed to be there. None of them were. Kurogiri stood quietly across the room, arms folded, eyes fixed on the monitor that was showing grainy video of the USJ attack. A flying notebook colliding with the Nomu's headside caused a frame to freeze. "Your decision to summon the additional Nomus was unauthorized," said Kurogiri. Shigaraki halted. "I had to. That vigilante group been doing numbers to other Jillian groups." He crossed his arms and sulked as he sank into a partially burned office chair. "I hate him. I hate his face. I hate his stupid floating book. Who the hell fights with a book?" Kurogiri did not panic. They were not acting like amateurs, and their coordination suggests training and preparation. "Exactly," yelled Shigaraki. "They're not even in the hero course. Who are they?" The communications box's red diode came to life. Kurogiri flipped the switch, and Sensei's annoyingly artificial voice reverberated throughout the room. "Tamura." Shigaraki tensed. "Yes, Sensei. You ignored your instructions." Defensive and agitated, Shigaraki whimpered, "They weren't supposed to be there. That book kid and his friends. They ambushed me. And it's not like the Guardian was there, right? Just the 3 kids. I thought it was fine." A long silence. "You were not to engage the book kid," Sensei said slowly, "regardless of the Guardian's presence." Shigaraki twitched his fingers, "But he wasn't there. I checked, multiple feeds." "Even so," said Sensei, "there are still too many unknowns." Kurogiri moved to the front. "Sir, the student's skills suggest instruction beyond any formal UA program. We suspect outside influence." "Correct," said Sensei. "The boy's abilities do not derive from a quirk alone. His power stems from Nen, a structured, metaphysical discipline of will and purpose. It allows for versatile, vow-bound techniques." Shigaraki's head cocked. "So it's just another power system? What, like Quirk 2.0? "No," said Sensei firmly. "It is not a replacement. It is a philosophy and a technique. It is built on limitations, creativity, and resolve. It makes him more dangerous, not because it is stronger, but because it is unpredictable and versatile." "But you're not scared of it, right?" Shigaraki said in a little voice, like a boy looking under the bed for monsters. "No," said Sensei icily. "I understand it, and I do not fear what I understand, but I respect it. More importantly, I respect the Guardian." Shigaraki's fists clenched. "We still don't even know who that guy is." "Correct," said Kurogiri. "No name. No registry. No records. All we have are sightings and stories. He's always watching, always nearby. We only know him as the Guardian." Muttered, "He's not real," Shigaraki said. Sensei declared, "He's real, and it was because of him that you were specifically ordered not to provoke the book kid." "But nothing happened," yelled Shigaraki. "I mean, okay, maybe I used 3 extra Nomus without clearance, but..." Sensei interrupted, saying, "You used assets that were not ready, they were unstable. disposable. And you still lost. Shigaraki sat back in rage, a sneer curling his lips. They got lucky. No, said Sensei. They were better prepared than you. The room was quiet. Kurogiri didn't change his tone. Sir, what are your next instructions? Observe. Do not act. I want every movement from those three tracked. Especially the book kid. Yes, sir. Sensei went on in a calm, low voice. Do not underestimate Nen again. Do not underestimate him. And until we learn the Guardian's true nature, do not provoke him. The call was cut off. For a moment, Shigaraki sat motionless, his eyes blazing. Then, he muttered to himself, one day, that book kid's is going to bleed like everyone else. A chair nearby crumbled to dust as his fingers twitched once more. And when he does, I'll be there to finish the job. Anonymous net poster. The unknown is not always your enemy, but pride in ignorance always is. Rain steadily pattered against the tall, domed windows of the top floor of UA. It was unusually quiet in Principal Nezu's office. There was a slight scent of herbal tea and metal in the air. A desk lamp's light bounced off walls stacked high with footage loops, schematics for support equipment, and intelligence folders. The majority of them stopped at the same frame, which was when All Might struck the Nomu with his last blow. With his scarf tightly wrapped around his slender frame and one hand cupped around a mug that had gone cold an hour earlier, Toshinori Yagi sat hunched on the edge of a reinforced chair. Nezu stood opposite him, his paws clasped behind his back, staring at a projection of the USJ's layered security feeds. Starting with 17 injured, Nezu said. 1 in critical condition. 2 students hospitalized overnight, no fatalities. Slowly, Toshinori nodded. Aizawa. Conscious. Stabilize. Though recovery girl insists he won't be standing for at least a week. That Nomu nearly crushed his ribcage. Yagi let out a breath. I should have gotten there sooner. Nezu gave him a quick look. You arrived when it mattered. You stopped the main threat, but... A new screen appeared when he tapped a display panel. It showed low-resolution video that was somewhat obscured by interference from Nomu. 3 masked figures were seen moving. They changed the entire trajectory of that battle before you arrived. One had a body on their back that had fallen. One was obviously a technician, using anti-tech pulses to disable Nomu countermeasures, deploying drones, and breaking into villain communications. The final one, thin, cloaked, and with his face hidden, battled a glowing book that changed form and effect with every page. Nezu remarked, they're coordinated, not reckless, not random, precise. Yagi narrowed her eyes and leaned forward. You think they're pro-level vigilantes? I think, Nezu remarked, swaying his tail, they're more than that. He selected the next file, a short audio clip taken from Kurogiri's open communication relay during the battle. That's him. The book kid. Sensei told us not to touch him if the other Nen users nearby. Yagi stopped. His voice was hardly more than a whisper as he repeated the words. Nen user. Nezu gave him another look. You recognize the term. Yes. And if they do too, then we have a deeper problem. Yagi rose slowly and approached the projection, pausing in front of a photograph that showed the vigilante trio jumping onto an ambulance that was leaving, an unregistered car that disappeared a few seconds after it passed through the outer evac perimeter. I've only ever heard of Nen in ancient training scrolls. Old techniques, older than quirks. It's not just power, it's a framework. Energy rooted in willpower and discipline. Nezu tapped in fresh files from a side display while lifting a paw. I ran the voice logs through an anonymous search net. That same boy, the book kid, has been mentioned on underground forums. Videos have been posted, then taken down. Edits appear in surveillance tapes of minor villain takedowns, but always scrubbed clean. He pivoted. He's making waves, Toshinori. But not like a hero. Not like a villain either. Something in between. Yagi scowled. And you don't think it's an accident they showed up at USJ? No, I think someone knew the League would attack. And those 3 responded faster than the Pro Network. There was a lull between them, interrupted only by the faint pings of background encrypted data archiving. A fist formed in Yagi's hand. Shigaraki. Kurogiri. This, Sensei, they're moving faster, bolder. Nezu gave a nod. And now they know who we're training, who we're protecting. The book kid's silhouette was magnified on the screen. As he protected the vigilante with the rifle from a Nomu blow, the book radiated like a tiny sun. They didn't just escape. They risked their lives protecting students. Multiple students, some of whom still think they were enemies. No name. No registration, and they just vanished, Yagi whispered. Nezu let out a sigh. Not exactly. I tracked where the ambulance was last seen. There was a drone ping from one of police scanners, before it was wiped. He furrowed his brow. You know what I think? Yagi glanced over, doubtful. I'm afraid to ask. Nezu gave a tight smile. I think one of them is a support course dropout, and another may not be a dropout at all. Yagi gasped for air. A student? Possibly. Someone skilled enough to infiltrate, train, and organize. Maybe under our noses. Maybe somewhere nearby. Nezu shut off the monitor. We don't have enough to accuse. Not yet, but I'll find them. That boy, whoever he is, he didn't move like a stranger to this city. Turning, Toshinori looked out the window. Outside, the storm was over. Mist clung to the glass in thin trails. Finally, let me talk to Gran Torino, he said. He's worked with underground networks before. If Nen's resurfacing, we need to understand who brought it back. Nezu gave a nod. Agreed. They stood silently for a long time. Nezu continued, and Toshinori, next time we face something like that, you won't be able to fight alone. Yagi shut his eyes. I know. Not every threat is loud. Some slip through the cracks, and write themselves into the future before you even know their names. Principal Nezu. At the community center, Izuku's first sensation was pain. Down his left side, deep in the bone, was a low, smoldering ache. Every breath felt like dragging air through a cracked pipe, and his head throbbed as if someone had packed it full of malfunctioning machinery. Slowly, he blinked, lights above flickering. He initially didn't recognize the ceiling, but eventually did. The community center. The first sound he heard was a gentle mechanical whir rather than a voice. Next. Neural activity, stabilizing. That's either a miracle or stubbornness. Probably both. Izuku blinked. Instead of the hospital's sterile white ceiling, the one above him was patched and uneven. The air smelled of coffee and antiseptic. Zuki, with its blue eye lens glowing dimly, the owl-shaped drone hovered into view. Welcome back, Dad 1.0. You had us in full system failure mode for a minute. Izuku tried to sit up, but he winced. His extremities objected. Everything hurt. What happened? Let's see, you got hit. Twice. Shielded Mei. Tried to fight 3 Nomus. Nearly got pulped. Again. Naomi dragged what was left of you out. Again. And I, your loyal AI partner, kept you from flatlining. You're welcome. He coughed after letting out a feeble laugh. Toga's been texting your number like a stalker, not sure if that's a good thing. Mom 1.0 hasn't slept, this time without coffee, and Shinso's been usually sitting here like a grumpy statue. Speaking of. Zuki's wings flicked open as she turned slightly. I'll let Shinso know you're awake, but for the record, don't do that again. You scared us, Izuku. Then Zuki vanished once more into Izuku. Izuku immediately regretted trying to sit up again. Easy. A voice. Slow, steady. Shinso. Izuku winced as he turned his head and saw him enter the room. He then sat on a crate that had been pulled up next to the cot, arms folded, eyes a little sunken from fatigue. You're lucky you didn't rupture a lung. Izuku whimpered once more and coughed. Nomu. Shinso gave a nod. You took the hit for her. Full force. Knocked you cold. Zuki tried to shield you but couldn't act fast enough. Izuku gave his temple a rub. How long? Day and a half. It took a moment for the words to register. He looked around. No, Mei. No, Naomi. Shinso swiftly added, they're okay. Observing the fear in his eyes. They got out with you. John and Lambeth did the pickup. You've been in and out since. Izuku exhaled nervously. Then there was quiet between them. It was not broken by Shinso. I simply watched. At last, Izuku said in a raspy voice, did anyone see? Your face? No, said Shinso. You stayed masked, and I made sure no one followed when y'all left. He turned his head away, but they're asking questions. Izuku tensed. I'm being brought in for questioning. Just preliminary, for now. Nezu's playing it close to the chest, but he's suspicious. Especially since I told the other that y'all were vigilante I heard about online. Izuku let out a low moan. I'm sorry, Shinso interrupted him. Don't. You did what you had to. We all did. Your mother cried as she always does, but she understood. He paused. She's been asking about you non-stop. She's freaked out. Naomi made sure she didn't come storming down here, and Mei. He looked down. Mei cried. She blamed herself. Said if her aim had been better, you wouldn't have needed to shield her. Izuku clenched his jaw and closed his eyes once more. Tell her it wasn't her fault. You tell her, when she gets here. He extended his hand and gave Izuku a quick tap on the shoulder with the back of it. You made a call back there. Taking the hit. Protecting her. You didn't hesitate. Izuku took a swallow. Didn't have time to. I know, but next time? Make time. We can't afford to lose you. I still believe that we can be heroes together. Izuku didn't anticipate that landing heavier, he simply gazed off into space. Thanks for watching over me. Shinso grinned. Can't let the book kid die on my watch. The forums would eat me alive. In fact, Izuku winced after chuckling. Ow, okay, no laughing. Shinso got up and stretched. Naomi and May'll be back soon. You should rest more. Your mom is already on her way to pick up Toga so that she can have some more time out so she can visit you. With a softer voice, Izuku opened one eye. You're not going to vanish before they get here, are you? A pause. Shinso sat back down and heard the scrape of the crate. Not a chance. In the moments after everything breaks, what matters is who stays long enough to help you rebuild. Unknown. Eren stood atop a plateau, looking out at the vanishing horizon, the wind piercing the thin fabric of his hood at this height. A sliver of ocean glowed under the dying sun in the distance, past cloud banks and mountain ranges. Beyond it, Japan. The nation he had left behind continued to observe. The pale shimmer of nen threads, like glowing threads in a spider's web, strewn across the air, reflected from behind his mask into his eyes. Most were low-burning and faint. But one continued to pulse with obstinate energy. He sensed it even from here. A child's will, shook, but unbroken. Eren remained silent. He made no attempt to grab a communicator. He didn't mutter a scheme. He just nodded once, slowly, as though he were responding to a question that only he could hear. Then, with his cloak flapping, he turned away from the edge and vanished into the mountain shadows. He had started a ripple, and it was spreading. The next wave was on its way. Even though the East Naruhata Community Center wasn't designed for fantasy campaigns, character sheets, dice rolls, and poor goblin voice impressions filled the back training room tonight. Their battleground was a scuffed folding table, littered with May's tool pouch, minis, and half-empty chip bags. A taped-together grid was covered with a hand-drawn dungeon map. Here, it was easy to laugh. I opened the cursed chest, Toga declared with a flourish. Behind the DM screen, Naomi let out a sigh. You really want to do that? Toga smiled. When has that ever stopped me? Fine, Constitution save. As Naomi rolled a fistful of dice, there was a chorus of moans. Shrugging, Shinso said, we're going to die again. May cocked her eyes. You all deserve it. From its perch next to the snacks, Zuki chirped. Danger confirmed. Turnpike probability. High. With their dramatic overacting and inside jokes, they continued to play on. Even though they were outsiders, tinkerers, healers, and vigilantes, they were once again children for a few hours. Until the night grew dreary. They packed away the dice. The map folded. There were only character sheets and crumbs left. Naomi stood up at that point. All right, real talk. Everybody raised their heads. Naomi looked over at Shinso. The UA Sports Festival is coming up. 2 weeks. Shinso scowled. Naomi. Her tone was calm but firm as she said, let me finish. You want the hero course? This is your chance. Shinso turned his head away. Not if it puts anyone here at risk. We don't use our full strengths. We don't draw attention, she stated. We just help you reach the final round, quietly. She turned to face the others. No glory. No standout moves. We go in like background characters and make sure Shinso stands out. With his notebook cradled against his chest, Izuku shifted against the wall. What would we even do? Support. Subtle tactics. Strategy. You're good at that, said Naomi, before continuing. You don't have to prove anything. Just, be there. May gave a contemplative nod. I can tweak some neutral equipment. Stuff that doesn't scream, vigilante. Toga, who had been silent since the start of this hero talk, leaned back in her chair and exhaled slowly. I still think it's a waste of time. Everybody turned to face her. She made an ambiguous gesture. Letting UA parade you around like you're finally acceptable. Cute, but it's a joke. Toga, began Izuku. She said, I get it, but with a softer tone. She glanced at him and said, I just don't believe in the system. But if you want to do it, I'll support you guys. Not the idea. Izuku smiled slightly, appreciatively, thanks. Shinso slowly got to his feet, now focusing on Izuku. You should be in the hero course too, you know. Izuku stopped. There was silence in the room. You act like you're just helping me, but we both know you're past ready. You're just scared of what it means. Izuku remained silent for a long moment. Next. I'm not scared. I just don't think I believe in it the same way anymore. Shinso nodded without pressing. Still, if the offer ever comes up. Izuku said, I'll say no, in a kind but firm manner. Toga gave a small smile. He's stubborn, told you. Naomi intervened, refocusing the attention. So, are we agreed? No heroics. No attention. Just help Shinso get to the final round. They all looked at each other. They nodded, one by one. Even, grudgingly, Toga. Zuki spread its wings and beeped. Squad formed. Objective. Stealth support. Morale level, 62%. May threw the owl a nut. Quiet, bird. Izuku took a seat again, opened his notebook, and gazed at a blank page. Let's do this. For Shinso. The sound of explosions filled the training field. Bakugo threw himself backward, teeth clenched, palms sparking, smoke clinging to the charred ground. He skidded across the gravel after a hard landing and then flipped back up. With his arms raised in a block and his skin glistening in the late afternoon sun, Kirishima stepped out of the smoke. Dude, he exclaimed, gasping for air as he laughed. You're gonna blow a crater through the fence again. Bakugo remained silent. With a sharp boom, he bounded forward, his palms glowing. In time, Kirishima hardened. With a grunt, he staggered back as the blast struck his guard. His feet were covered in dust. They hesitated. They are both breathing heavily. They're both perspiring. Kirishima gave a knuckle crack. All right. What's going on with you? You usually don't ask me to train unless something's eating at you. Bakugo scowled. Shut up. Raising an eyebrow, Kirishima refrained from pressing. Using the edge of his tank top to wipe perspiration from his brow, he took a seat on a nearby training pad. Standing with his fists clenched, Bakugo watched the smoke drift languidly into the sky. He muttered abruptly, You remember the one with the tail? Kirishima gave a blink. From the USJ? The vigilante girl? With his gaze fixed on the distant wall, Bakugo gave a single nod. She took down a Nomu. Clean hit. Fast, like, stupid fast. Kirishima reclined a little. Yeah, I saw it. Didn't think anyone else noticed. I did, said Bakugo. And the book kid, he walked away. Kirishima's head cocked. What about him? He moved like he knew the fight before it started. He wasn't guessing, he was orchestrating. Bakugo's voice was low, as if admitting it made him angry. And I don't know if I could take either of them. Kirishima straightened her posture. Wait, you think they could beat you? Bakugo remained silent. He simply clenched his fists more tightly, leaving tiny sparks behind. They're our age. Maybe younger. And they're out there bleeding for people in alleyways while we're doing obstacle courses and media prep. Kirishima remained silent for a while. Next. You think they'll be at the sports festival? At last, Bakugo turned to face him. If they are, I'm not losing. Not to them. Not to anyone. Grinning, Kirishima got back up and gave him a shoulder clap. Then let's keep training. You'll blast your way past them. I'll harden up. We'll take them together if we have to. Bakugo grunted out loud. Not entirely in agreement. Thanks, but not quite. However, it was sufficient. They returned to their formation. Louder than the previous blast, the next one shattered the training field. The gentle flutter of notebook pages and the occasional crinkle of sandwich wrap filled the gym at East Naruhata Community Center. Shinso and Naomi were quietly preparing lunches for tomorrow's after-school field trip at a folding table close to the back wall. Brown bags were neatly arranged in rows next to stacks of fruit cups and tiny water bottles. Almost done, Naomi remarked, writing a name on the last label. Shinso remained silent. He was observing the mat. Izuku stood shirtless in the middle of the gym, intent, a dim light flickering through the paper page he was holding. The pages of his Quirk book fluttered like restless wings as it hovered next to him. His eyes remained steady, but sweat stuck to his skin. A whisper, let's try this again, he said. The page fused to his chest and shimmered. Armor started to take shape on his body as a ripple swept outward. Not metal. Not cloth. Something in between, like organic matter carved into smooth, segmented plating and hardened text. It traced down to his left bicep, wrapping around his shoulder and ribs. He stumbled, then regained his balance. Sitting close by, Toga watched with open curiosity, and something else in her eyes, while holding her chin in her hands. "Ooh, still working on your body mods, Midoriya," she quipped. "Should I be jealous of the book?" Izuku didn't raise his gaze. "This isn't for style points." She smiled. "Could have fooled me. Looking like a knight in nerdy armor. How's it feel?" His arm was flexed. "Heavy. But stronger. I needed to hold. After the USJ, after seeing how fast the Nomu were, how strong." He gave a headshake. "I'm not fast enough. Not tough enough. If I can't reinforce my body, I'll just get crushed." Toga got up and slowly circled him. "So you're trying to become a quirk tank, like a wizard with mage armor. Cute. I like it." He gave her a blink. "Cute?" She pressed a finger against one of the armor plates on his chest and leaned in. "I mean, I did help unlock your transformation breakthrough the first time. You gonna dedicate this one to me?" Izuku's mind momentarily stopped moving. I mean, that was a team effort." She cocked her head. "Oh, so you don't want to wear me?" His jaw dropped. Nothing was said. Naomi stifled a laugh across the gym. Shinso made no attempt at all. Shinso muttered, "He's so unaware it's impressive." Naomi grinned. "At this point it's a gift." At that moment, the gym doors creaked open, and Mei Hatsume entered with goggles pressed to her forehead and a toolbox in one hand. "Zuki. Where's my owl son?" "Oh." She stopped in her tracks. She looked first at Izuku, who was shirtless, sweating, and partially armored. With his hand still resting on his chest plate, Toga stood very close after that. Mei paused for a moment, her smile wavering. "Well, this looks cozy." Toga remained motionless. She smirked at Mei, a grin that could shatter glass. "Hey, techie. Just helping Zuzu get a feel for his curves." Mei nearly recoiled at the sound of Zuzu. "I designed half those curves, thanks." Mei bounded back, taking a step forward. Izuku exchanged blinks with them. "Wait, what's happening?" Shinso deadpanned to Naomi while still seated, saying, "It's like watching a slow-motion car crash where the car is emotionally constipated and doesn't know it's moving." Naomi handed him another box of juice. "Shush. Let them spiral." Mei crossed her arms, narrowed her eyes, and thumped her toolbox down. "Hope you're not overloading the pages. You got to make sure it's simple by effective, Izu." Now, the word, Izu, made Toga's face tickle in irritation. Attempting to hide it, Toga shrugged and said, "He's doing fine without all your little technical lingo." Izuku attempted to retreat, growing more agitated. "Guys, seriously, it's just armor. I was testing compatibility, that's it." Zuki beeped joyfully while sitting on a shelf for storage, beside Naomi and Shinso. "Love triangle detected. Instability rising. Emotional temperature. Spicy," Zuki murmured. Izuku fell to his knees in a slump. "Guys, a little help?" Toga gave a snort. With a sigh, Mei dropped to her knees next to him and opened her toolbox. "Fine. If you're going to fuse pages into armor, we're doing it right. Let me at least design the armor." Toga also sat next to him, obnoxious. "Only if I get to test the next one with him." In a whisper, Shinso said, "Place your bets." In response, Naomi muttered, "My money's on chaos." Zuki's head made a full 360-degree turn and he laughed robotically. Except for the steady click of Nezu's mechanical pen, the meeting room in the administration wing of UA was silent. As usual, he stood on top of his chair with a thick folder spread out in front of him. Aizawa leaned back in his chair across the table, his eyes tired but alert, his scarf wrapped loosely around his neck. With an unreadable expression, All Might, still in his smaller form, sipped a cup of tea. The upcoming UA was shown in a slideshow on the screen at the far end of the room. Roster of applicants and brackets for the sports festival. Nezu lightly tapped the edge of a chart and remarked, "This year's batch of applicants for the general ed and support courses has been strong, more than expected." Aizawa's gaze remained fixed on the screen. "It's the timing. Kids want to be seen right now. Even the quiet ones." All Might gave a nod. "That could be a good thing. If someone's struggling to find their path, maybe this is the push they need." Nezu shut the folder. "Yes, if that's all it is." Then there was silence. Aizawa then broke it. "You're both still thinking about them. The vigilantes." Nezu smiled placidly. "Can you blame me? After USJ, I've reviewed every second of available footage. There are too many skill sets. Too much coordination. and not a single confirmed identity. The voice of All Might was low. They saved lives. And evaded pros, Aizawa continued. They knew the layout. The villains' patterns. One of them even was able to fight the big Nomu. Briefly. Once more, Nezu tapped the pen. If, and this is still an if, they're UA students, this festival is the perfect time for them to show their hand. Even a hint. Even a movement style. Aizawa remarked, some of them moved like trained fighters, not just quirk users. Real-world experience, and that book. He frowned as he paused. I've reviewed every frame where it was visible. No match in the student registry. But it had to be a support item. Possibly AI enhanced. Nen based, said All Might. The others gave him a look. He didn't go into detail. Nezu cleared his throat and stated, so, we keep an eye on things. Quietly. No accusations, no meddling, just observation. If they're here and they slip, we'll know. Aizawa gave a nod. I've got eyes on a few candidates, including Hitoshi Shinso. All Might blinked. Shinso? Why him? He has potential with his quirk, and him fighting at USJ also proves that as well. And his entrance into the festival is strategic, Nezu continued. He didn't just apply, he's aiming for a transfer. It wouldn't be the first time someone used the festival for misdirection. Aizawa's tone grew softer. I don't think he's one of them, but I think he knows something. Or someone. He was the only one knew about the vigilante group due to online forums. All Might posed the question, should we intervene? Nezu gave a headshake. Not yet. Let the firelight draw the shadows out. If they're watching, they'll move soon. The slideshow advanced on its own. The festival attendees' names flashed across the screen. Aizawa's eyes narrowed. We watch, we wait, and we don't blink. The day prior to the sports festival, the East Naruhata Community Center's front room had the feel of a mission briefing mixed with a locker room. Brown paper bags marked for tomorrow's after-school field trip were spread out on the table. Silently and methodically, Naomi and Shinso were taping the last of them shut. Mei was standing close by, holding a duffel bag full of authorized tools. Her pink goggles were pushed up onto her forehead, and her hair was tangled in a messy knot. She appeared locked, which is unusual for Mei Hatsume at school functions. Okay. This is it. UA Sports Festival rules are strict. I'm allowed 10 mid-tech support items, and they all have to be non-offensive, safety approved, and nothing remotely battle enhancing. That means no drones, no boosters, no gadgets that go boom. She closed her case abruptly and turned to face Izuku. And you, Izuku, are going in with nothing but yourself. No armor, Izuku said, nodding. No electronics. No peculiarities. He kept his notebook hidden. Understood. No tricks. No gear. Just what I've trained. Across the room, Naomi added her voice. Same for me. No tech, no bioenergy, no help. We're not here to stand out. She reminded everyone, we're here to get Shinso to the finals, that's the only goal. As he slung a simple gray bag over his shoulder, Shinso appeared somewhat overwhelmed. You all really don't have to. You already said that, Naomi said, smiling subtly, and we're still doing it. On the adjacent table, Toga sat half-sprawled and tossed an apple up and down. I can't believe I'm spending my day off watching a glorified obstacle course. However, she spoke in a light, playful tone. She had already dressed to fit in with the group. John, wearing his usual resting frown, leaned against the frame from the side doorway. All this effort for some school tournament. Naomi failed to step up. This matters to him. John gave a shrug. It shouldn't, but fine. Trayvon rushed in behind him with a handmade paper crown that was covered in stickers and glitter before he could get away. Naomi. You're gonna win, right? Naomi smiled and leaned down. I'm not trying to win, Trey. I'm just helping Shinso. He put the crown on her head and said, but you could, with pride. John grimaced but remained silent. He has more faith in us than we do, Shinso whispered. Trayvon's hair was ruffled by Naomi. That's why he's the best of us. Mei took the stage and spoke to the group once more. Final checklist. No quirks. No books. No boosts. Just teamwork, timing, and staying under the radar. We blend in, we play our roles, we back up Shinso when he needs it, that's it. Hovering close by, Zuki looked through each of their gear bags. Compliance confirmed. Risk level, moderate. Emotional temperature, cautiously determined. Toga leaned in Izuku's direction. You really think you can help him with just your fists and that jumbled brain of yours? Izuku gave a tiny smile. I think I can support him, that's enough. She gave him a forehead flick. Toga winked and said, you're kind of a dork. Immediately, Mei added, he's my dork. There was no subtle silence after that. Slowly, Naomi turned to face Shinso. We're witnessing something. Yep, he replied. And we can't stop it. The tension briefly subsided as they all laughed quietly together. The sun had just started to rise when Naomi turned to face the window. Tomorrow's game time. No powers. No weapons. Just grit. Let's make it count. The pre-UA Sports Festival evening the UA it was quiet on campus. In order to burn off nervous energy or review last-minute tactics, the majority of the students have already left for their homes or training rooms. Less than 12 hours separated us from the sports festival. However, Toshinori Yagi stood by himself on the faculty building's rooftop, his skeletal body hardly visible against the moonlight, his coat buttoned against the chill. He was unsure of whether to hold on or let go, as evidenced by the slightly curled fingers on his hands resting on the railing. The stadium lights were off below him, but he could still make out the banners, the scaffolding, and the practice lanes, which were set up like a waiting battlefield. There was no excitement in him, he regretted it. Midoriya, he uttered the name softly, letting the wind carry it away. It had been weeks since the day before the USJ incident that he had last seen the boy. The rooftop, he recalled, the way Izuku had gripped his notebook, heart in his throat, and asked the question that no one had ever politely responded to. Can someone without a quirk still be a hero? He had been told no by Toshinori. Because I was afraid. Now, to the wind alone, he said it out loud. Afraid that you'd break chasing something the world didn't want you to have. Afraid you'd fall, like I did. His gaze strayed to the horizon, where the city was dimly illuminated by the stars. He considered the articles. The gossip. The rising reputation of a vigilante who fought like someone who understood pain well and moved like a tactician. The child who reads. Toshinori had no evidence. He had instinct, though, and he had a gut feeling that the boy he had rejected was still moving. A whisper, you should be here, he said. Not in the shadows, not in secret. His chosen successor, Mirio, crossed his mind. The student with the golden hue. A symbol in the making, smiling and strong. Yet here he was, contemplating the child he had not chosen. He acknowledged, I picked Mirio because he was prepared, but sometimes I wonder. His tone faltered. What would have happened if I'd said yes? If I told you that you could be a hero without a quirk? That being good, being selfless, was enough? The answer eluded him. Only the guilt. Wherever you are, young Midoriya, I hope you're still trying. For a long time, he allowed the silence to consume him. Unaware that he would see Midoriya Izuku again tomorrow, whether he realized it or not, he turned away from the railing and made his way to the stairs. It was simply not how he remembered the sports festival day. The community center's rooftop was serene, with a gentle, cozy breeze. The skyline was just starting to show signs of morning light. The city below moved slowly, as if it had not yet realized that today was supposed to be significant. With his legs hanging over the edge, Shinso sat on the ledge and drank from a lukewarm juice box. Izuku was standing close by with his duffel at his feet, his arms crossed, and a hoodie on. He had a calm expression on his face and was dressed normally, not yet in festival attire. Neither of them spoke for a time. When Shinso finally asked, you nervous? Izuku gave a shrug. About making a fool of myself with no gear or quirks? Not at all. Shinso gave a snort. Well, you've trained harder than half the hero course. When Izuku said, I'm not doing this for recognition, just for you. Shinso gave a gentle smile. That's why it matters. He added, still no word from Eren, after taking another sip. Izuku gave a headshake. Nothing since the last encrypted message. Just that he's handling something overseas, whatever that means. Typical, mumbled Shinso. Right when things get complicated. Izuku gave a slow nod. He said he trusts me to handle things. I think this is his way of forcing me to grow without him. You are growing, said Shinso, even if you don't want to admit it. Izuku took a while to reply. Pulling his knees up, he walked to the ledge and sat next to Shinso. Quietly, he stated, I've been working on stabilizing the transformation quirks, without only the book transforming. There's something there. Muscle memory, maybe. Like my body remembers the rhythm. Shinso turned to look, but you're not using any of that today. Izuku gave a headshake. I want this to be clean. Just us. To let you really shine and be the hero we know you are. Shinso just turned to face the sky and looked away, flashing one of his infrequent smiles. And still no interest in the hero course? Izuku let out a breath. I'm not a hero. Shinso now gazed at him. You do realize you're helping me, in secret, risking exposure, pushing yourself past your limits, for a goal that doesn't benefit you at all. That's only today, not even what you've been doing the past couple of months. Izuku muttered, that's loyalty, not heroism. When no one is looking, that is acting morally. Shinso looked at him sidelong. Pretty thin line. Izuku gave a small smile. I know. Once more, they sat quietly, allowing the wind to pass by. Then he inquired, if the chance came up, transfer exam, full offer, all of it, would you take it? Izuku gazed at the sun as it rose. No, he replied. Not unless I can do it my way. On my terms. And right now, that doesn't fit inside a classroom. Shinso nodded, understanding, not disappointed. Well, I still think you'd be a hell of a hero. Izuku gave him a gentle shoulder bump. That makes one of us. Shinso's pocket gave a soft beep. It's time to leave. Slinging their bags over their shoulders, they both stood. No ostentatious farewells. No grandiose pronouncements. Just a silent goal. Blaring horns, stomping feet, and the artificial cheer of 1,000 pre-recorded chants filled the stadium with noise. It was overly bright. The kind of brightness that is intended to overwhelm and divert. Izuku didn't raise his gaze. He pushed through the smoke cloud created by an exploded barrier and ducked under a swinging trap arm. His shirt clung to him with dirt and sweat, and his leg burned where he'd scraped it against the climbing wall. Clean, dancer-like, Naomi jumped over a half-fallen robot chassis behind him. With her back-mounted propulsion unit whirring and her goggles foggy, Mei trailed closely behind. Shinso had a significant lead already, concentrated, accurate, tactical. His name was among the top 10, 9th position. The others? In the center of the pack, somewhere. Not for long, not observed, enough. That was the objective, in the bleachers. With a bag of kettle corn spilling onto Trayvon's lap, Toga leaned forward over the railing, her sunglasses too large for her face. See? They made it through, she commented with a smile. Barely, but they did. Trayvon wiped his jeans of crumbs. They're not even trying to win. Softly, they're trying not to lose, Inko remarked. In her lap, her hands were clasped too tightly. There's a difference. As Izuku crossed the finish line, a second behind Naomi and just ahead of Mei, Toga's gaze followed him without a reply. He didn't grin. Didn't have a party. Moved just now. Near the prep area again. When the others caught up, Shinso was reading the scoreboard. Under 9th, his name was hovering in red. He was not surprised. However, it did validate one thing. They were being observed. Not only by educators, but also by others. People who saw trends. Those who saw restraint. Mei casually wiped grease off her cheek with her sleeve and asked, we still doing one team? No, said Naomi firmly. Too risky. We split, all solo. Izuku caught his breath and nodded. Make it look unplanned. Blend in. Let the others play their games. Shinso's gaze squinted toward the field, and we play ours. They walked out in different directions, bumping elbows, knuckles, fists, and whatever came naturally. The festival was just getting started. The actual narrative had not yet begun. What about the subtext, running deep already? With his jaw clenched and his fists clenched, Bakugo pushed through the metal doors into the recovery tunnel. He finished 4th. 4th. Not initially. He was still able to hear the crowd exploding behind him, the mechanical grind of robots that had fallen, and that damn gravel slope that caused him to slow down just enough to fall behind Todoroki and a few Gen Ed unknowns. He was furious. He didn't even look when someone blocked his path just past the corridor's entrance. He slammed his shoulder into them. Hard. They stumbled but did not tumble. Bakugo pivoted, poised to snarl, and came to a complete stop. Midoriya. Sweat-damp hair. Steady breathing. Half-untucked shirt. A towel draped over one shoulder. Not breathing heavily. Staying steady. Simply standing there and staring at him. Be calm. He felt that old uneasiness creep up his spine for a moment. Midoriya had stopped staring up at him. He was examining him. You got a death wish or something, standing there like that? Bakugo sneered. Izuku looked up at him, his eyes unblinking, without flinching. Bakugo. The name struck more forcefully than the shove. Not Kachan. Just Bakugo, as if he were not a memory, a mistake made as a child, or someone to whom Izuku owed anything. Only a name. The frown on Bakugo's face shifted. What did you just call me? Without blinking, Izuku said, you heard me. Bakugo was momentarily at a loss for words. Then a cool, smooth voice interrupted, is something wrong? Bakugo's gaze changed, and she appeared, arms folded, standing next to Midoriya, tall, poised, self-assured, eyes like soft thunder. Naomi. Whoever she was, she didn't appear anxious or even interested. Instead, she seemed measured and aware, as if she had anticipated this moment and knew how it would unfold. She was gorgeous, damn it. That fact was like a sucker punch to Bakugo's chest, and he saw how her eyes didn't flinch or shuffle as people usually did when facing him. Instead, they just looked, and they looked like stars in the sky. He felt heat in his face for half a second. He buried it in frustration. TCH. So, Midoriya, you need someone to cover for you now? He doesn't need anyone to do anything, Naomi said without responding. She wasn't supporting him, she was merely stating the facts in a controlled, even voice. Bakugo turned to look at Izuku again, searching for the flinch, the muttered stammer, the nervous twitch that used to accompany every confrontation. It was absent. Just that calm expression. Whatever, he whispered, you two avoid me in the following round. I'd rather not be a babysitter for half-assed hero wannabes. Naomi arched an eyebrow and said, likewise. Izuku turned and left, followed by Naomi. Bakugo also pivoted on his heel, didn't turn around. Did not wish to, however, the sensation persisted. Now Midoriya had changed. He was accompanied by others. Bakugo detested the fact that it made him uneasy. Speakers blared the cavalry battle rules as the stadium roared with anticipation, but the real tension was in the pauses between words, the strategic looks between teams, and the twitches of fingers waiting to move. With one hand shaking around her thermos and the other clutching her scarf as if it were a lifeline, Inko Midoriya sat rigidly, her gaze fixed on the field. As team numbers and placements scrolled past, Trayvon squinted at the board, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees next to her. With a half-empty bag of candy sitting forgotten in her lap, Toga had kicked off her shoes and was crouching on the stadium seat like a bird, her eyes darting restlessly from team to team. There, she muttered, that's Shinso's group, 9th seed. Slowly, Inko nodded. Mei and Naomi are also present, however, not with one another. Muttered, they split up, Trey said. Again, Toga chewed a gummy and remarked, good, they're not stupid. Teams of students formed below. Shinso stood dead center, arms crossed, mind already working angles, and assembled a pragmatic squad, no show, all discipline. Mei joined a tech-heavy Class 1B group, and it's obvious that she controls the strategy without having to take the lead. Standing at the base of a three-person pyramid, Naomi, as stoic as ever, exuded quiet confidence, and her team moved as if they had already practiced, hardly speaking. Izuku, too. He was modest, quiet, and tucked into a 1A team, essentially supporting it without any ostentatious strategies or support items. Why does he not do more? He could be up front, Trey said, or on the team of Shinso. At first, Inko didn't respond because her eyes were too fixed and too perceptive. She said, he's doing exactly enough, and they all are. The buzzer went off. The field exploded into chaos in a flash. Screams of challenge and laughter reverberated throughout the stadium as students launched themselves into the air, quirks flared, and gadgets whirred to life. Alliances clashed. Izuku's team, however, refrained from joining the battle. They woven, slipped, avoided, never in the spotlight, but always just ahead of the trouble. Shinso's team, on the other hand, held their ground as students came at them one by one and froze, either literally or figuratively. Shinso hardly moved, allowing his teammates to block while he muttered brief, baiting phrases. Nobody wanted to approach after Mei's team set off a series of smoke bombs and scatter mines, which were harmless but confusing. While the others fought like gladiators, Naomi's team moved in a slow rhythm, gathering cheap headbands. With narrowed eyes, Trey observed, they're playing the long game again. The invisible kind. Toga nodded. The last few seconds passed. The rest? Mid-tier. Shinso came in third, no gold. No glorification. But no exposure, no injuries. Enough. With a final sigh, Inko returned to the stands and said, he's safe. With her head resting on her shoulder, Toga said, for now. You think this was all planned? Trayvon asked, leaning back. Inko stated, every second, adding, they're not here to win. Toga added with a faint smile, They're here to survive, and maybe to make sure he still has a choice. She gestured to Izuku, who was already leaving the field with a low head and an unreadable expression. He was not followed by the cameras. In the stands, however, 3 sets of eyes did. Cold light flickered across the concrete walls of the control room as screens flickered and the gentle whir of surveillance feeds hummed. Perched on his tall swivel chair, Nezu tapped his pen in a slow, methodical rhythm. With a light tone, he stated, "No unusual readings, no hacked tech, no unexplained flares. Our extracurricular students are more silent than ghosts if they are present." With a loosely coiled scarf around his neck, Aizawa leaned against the doorframe, his gaze fixed on the main screen. He remarked, "Ghosts leave footprints, and these children moved with ease. Zero wasted motion and real-world coordination. I refuse to believe in coincidence." Nezu twitched his whiskers and said, "Then perhaps coincidence has simply been training." All Might was standing across the room with his arms folded, his tiny body partially obscured by the shadows, and he had not yet spoken, his gaze fixed on a single feed. Izuku Midoriya, who was calmly walking with his cavalry team and assisting another student in tying a loose strap. "Too quiet. Too much like home. Do we intervene if they are here?" Aizawa said, breaking the silence. Slowly, Nezu shook his head. "No, not just yet. This is the celebration. An observation stage. Allow the shadows to dance if they so choose. If they move into the light, we'll be prepared." With a faint clenching of his hand at his side, All Might spoke in a soft voice. "Some shadows deserve a second chance." The others didn't respond. However, in that silent chamber, where the stadium's thunder was muffled by glass and concrete, all 3 men were aware of. There were still vigilantes. All they did was wait. Naomi didn't flinch when the medic's cold spray hissed against her shoulder. A bruise was already growing close to her collarbone, exactly where she'd fallen during the last scramble of the cavalry battle, and it looked dramatic enough for the cameras, but it was also serious enough to cause concern. The scrape ran down the length of her upper arm, but it was manageable. The point had been that. With a cautious smile, the support medic said, "You should be all right in a few days, however, for now." Naomi said, "I'll forfeit," before he could say anything more. He blinked. "Are you certain?" With one nod, she said, "Safety first." He wrote something down on his tablet and continued. Naomi sat quietly on the edge of the exam cot, knowing the names already and not needing to look at the board. Shinso versus Izuku, Iida versus Mei, not her versus Todoroki. She could hear Tetsu arguing about match pairings across the hall, Mei already requesting a backup capacitor pack, and Izuku still hadn't arrived, most likely assisting one of the other children with their equipment. Additionally, Shinso, he was standing close to the door, looking at her. "Is it authentic?" he inquired. "Is what real?" asked Naomi, raising an eyebrow. "The injury." A ghostly smile crossed her face as she said, "Real enough for them to accept it." He nodded and let out a slow exhale, saying, "I figured." "You earned it," she said quietly. "You needed to advance. You simply don't need to fight me anymore." A pause occurred. "You always do this," Shinso said, glancing down at his own hands as if unsure of what to do with them. "What should I do?" "Take the hit." Naomi reached for her jacket and slipped it over her bandaged shoulder without responding. She said, "Next time," getting to her feet, "I'll make it look more dramatic." The announcer's voice boomed overhead as she left the medic's tent. "And regrettably, Naomi Ikari will not be competing in the final round because of a minor injury. We hope she gets well soon." The audience did not jeer. They did not respond at all. Because Naomi had never been the one to watch for the majority of them. And that was the plan, as usual. As Izuku Midoriya and Hitoshi Shinso entered the ring, the tournament stage glistened with heat, and the audience cheered quietly, with no one particularly anticipating the bout. "Present Mike, amped." Next up, 2 students from General Studies who have a point to make, Hitoshi Shinso versus Izuku Midoriya. "Who says this is a hero course-only tournament?" Aizawa, dryly. "These 2 might be more dangerous than half the hero kids anyway." Present Mike. "Hey, remember, though, that Shinso's quirk stirred up the cavalry battle. Additionally, Midoriya is a bit of a mystery who doesn't seem to have any peculiarities." Aizawa responds, "Let's just be quiet and see what happens." Naomi repositioned her bandaged shoulder from a shaded row in the mid-level stands, her gaze fixed on the middle of the field. Inko sat to Naomi's left, tense but calm. Trey sat between them, small hands gripping the edge of his seat, silent and focused, and she sat next to Toga, who leaned forward with elbows on her knees, bouncing her leg anxiously. Toga narrowed his eyes and said, "This is it. He's going to give it to him." Naomi remained silent, observing Izuku's jaw set and the way he let out a breath before taking his place. She whispered, "He made up his mind before he intervened. He always chooses someone else," Inko said softly. With a slow blink, Trey leaned forward and said, "I think he wants to lose." Looking at him, Toga said, "He doesn't want to lose." Nodding, Trey said, "He wants Shinso to win." Shinso was the first to call out on the field. "You believe you're superior to me?" Izuku remained silent. There was a long pause before Shinso moved forward, his fists up, not just to fight but to prove himself. "You believe you can remain silent and still be noticed?" Shinso shouted. Izuku did not respond, however. Naomi's voice was hardly audible above a whisper. "He's baiting the trigger." By nodding, Toga said, and Izuku's about to hand it to him. Izuku barely avoided Shinso's lunge, but he didn't push back or counter. A close observer could tell he was holding back because the rhythm was off just enough. In her lap, Inko's hands clenched. He could win, Trey scowled. "I'm sure he could prevail." As Inko muttered, "I know, sweetheart, but this isn't about him." Then it was said by Shinso. "Just say something." Izuku also did. "Only one word." "Okay." His body froze as a flash of violet light danced across his eyes. Shinso's quirk had worked, and he blinked in surprise. The audience let out a gasp. He issued a single order. "Step out of bounds." Izuku also did, just one step. 2. Beyond the edge. The buzzer went off. The arena burst into flames. Spectators stood, commentators yelled. And nobody in their group moved in the stands. With a sigh, Toga said, "Well, there it is." He gave it to him clean. Naomi nodded. "He made it look like a real fight," admitted Trey. "He made it a gift," Inko muttered, "but not a pity one." With her shoulder hurting under the bandage, Naomi leaned back and said, "And Shinso will never forget it." Looking at her, Toga said, "Neither will he." Shinso stood stunned in the ring, hardly lifting his fist, and they all looked down. Izuku left without turning around. A match was watched by the crowd. However, they had seen a decision. And they all knew in their hearts. The tournament was never the point of this.
I will continue this story next part. Till then, bye bye.